Yo guys, it's RyugaXD. You already know YouTube has its limit size, so if you want to see the spicier, uncensored, and exclusive stuff I can't post here, check out my Patreon. That's where I drop all my 18+ lemon content, early uploads, and more. Links in the description. Come join the fun. Ayan Kingyo ran to his great-grandparents' house through the village. Ayan had green eyes and disheveled red hair. He was 4 feet 7 inches tall when he was 12 years old. He usually wore a dark blue long-sleeve shirt, a white belt just at his waistline. He wore light gray capris-style pants with wrappings covering his lower calves. On his legs were 4 scrolls with each holding a puppet. The little boy was ecstatic. Even though he wasn't quite old enough to graduate the academy, he was getting the chance to apply early to become a genin for Sunakager. He ran in and discovered Chio and her brother Ebizo fighting in their small personnel pond. "Granny-san," he exclaimed. Chio turned to see her great-grandson. "Oh little Ayan, what are you doing here?" she exclaimed as she stood up and extended her arms to him. Chio grinned and ruffled his head, saying, "I came to see you before my test to become a genin for Suna. Oh how I wish you wouldn't be a shinobi, my boy." Ayan pouted for a moment before Ebizo said, "Lighten up, Chio. If anyone is going to redeem our family, it's that boy right there." She turned to face her brother, her glare sending shivers down his spine. Chio was clearly concerned when she said, "Now, you will be tested today." Only one other child of this age was tested today. Keisuke Gaara. Hopefully, Ayan wouldn't be assigned to a team with Gaara if he passed. Even though she was confident that Ayan would eventually possess the strength and skill necessary to defeat a tailed beast on his own, she warned that, "You will be tested in combat, intelligence, and in ninjutsu." "I'll be careful, Granny, promise," she said, ruffling the boy's hair as she bid him farewell and wished him luck. He would undoubtedly be the youngest puppet user, but he wouldn't be the only one. Suna made an effort to prevent its kids from turning into ninjas before they reached adolescence. They are a resource that is difficult to replace, not because it's the right thing to do. The village would push them to fight and possibly start a war without any justification because they were a valuable item. To her own son and grandson, Chio reflected. The war left Sasori severely traumatized. The White Wolf of Kanakager killed his parents. Perhaps her grandson would not have left the village if she had been wiser and more sympathetic to him. One of the most dangerous missing ninja in the world. Fortunately, she was given another chance with Ayan. So much like his mother, Kyatsu Uzumaki was a formidable woman. Long red hair and hazel eyes. She and Chio combined to make Ayan a strong, talented boy. From an early age, he had developed an interest in puppets. But not from her. She took him to a street fair when he was just 3 years old. One of the performers performed for the kids using tiny puppets. The performance completely captivated Ayan. She then started instructing him in puppetry. But Sasori was threatening to come for his son. Kyatsu made the decision to teach him shinobi techniques. He uses kenjutsu to give him an advantage in close quarters, taijutsu to provide him with a fallback, and seals to sharpen his tactical thinking and trapping options. Compared to most puppet users, he was much more well-rounded. Something for which she was very thankful. Ayan arrived outside the village at a training field. Several spectators were around to judge and watch the applicants. There were 45 applicants in all. The majority were older than him, between the ages of 13 and 15. He wasn't whining, though. It was more difficult. He was the age of one boy. The boy had a huge gourd on his back, as he could see. His attire was very similar to his own, wearing a short-sleeved shirt and a black bodysuit. He appeared to be wearing a fishnet shirt underneath. His red hair was much more spiky and a shade darker than his own. The cage suddenly materialized in front of everyone. He was accompanied by several jonin to watch each of them. Genin Rasa started by addressing the other boy in the crowd, saying, "Today you are all here to see whether you are worthy of joining our village as shinobi of the sand. There will be 3 tests. First will be a written test. Second will be a test of ninjutsu. Finally, a test by combat. Now go and prove to me you belong. I shall be watching." Gold sand desks materialized before each competitor. He started by calling his puppet Byako to sit on Ayan. As they passed, many of the jonin glanced at the puppet. Now, one of the shinobi is showing more interest in him. The puppet wasn't that special in his opinion. It was a tiger puppet with 2 extremely sharp teeth. It had a pipe in its mouth for shooting sanbon and claws on all 4 feet. When it ran at its enemies, 2 blades in its back would shoot out on either side. Time. They called as Ayan finished his own test. He stood up and placed his puppet back into its scroll, watching the desk fall away. Everyone was then divided into groups of 5. An older shinobi led Ayan's group to another area of the field. To evaluate their performance, 3 judges sat at a desk. Ayan kept a close eye on each other as they competed. None of those children had anything particularly noteworthy. Simple cloning techniques. A boy displayed his kenjutsu skills. One of the girls was quite skilled at wind jutsu. There was then a boy who used sand to make a clone. Ayan Ningyo, you're up next. He took a step forward and produced 2 scrolls. He's just a kid. Yeah, someone that small can't be that good. He smiled and tossed the 2 scrolls into the air as the other 4 children laughed at him. In front of everyone, 2 puppets materialized. His staff favorite was the first. Futsumaiki was a tiny, nimble puppet. It was light brown with black eyes and resembled an exoskeleton. It had red tuft of hair and was stooped. It was by far his favorite puppet and the first one he had constructed. However, his second puppet was far more potent. Kinja was a puppet of a serpent. After learning about the snake Sanin of Kanakager's ability to summon snakes, he came up with it. It was constructed using a method he developed with Lady Chio's assistance. With scales, it was nearly unbreakable. It was extremely powerful and capable of hurling poisonous breath at his adversaries. Bite them with its strong mouth or bind them in its body, crushing them. Interesting. Puppets of your own design. Unlike other older designed puppets, they moved with ease and produced little noise. Let's see how they hold up. He moved fluidly and effectively, making hand gestures and directing a wind blade at the puppets. Futsumaiki instantly leapt behind Kinja with a finger flick. The larger puppet was struck by the attack, but it remained stationary. As he sealed the puppets away once more, the judges all nodded in agreement. The other pupils were all silent and uncommunicative. Standing atop a small tower, Rasa was keeping a close eye on things. As he moved on to the next section, his gaze remained fixed on Ayan. Ayan got chills when he saw the arena. He was anxious because he knew that this time he was really fighting someone. Everyone fought one another one by one. You are all going to be paired against another student. It is a fight to submission or till we tell you to stand down. As each match continued, Ayan watched. Before a girl with long brown hair that framed her white-collared shirt and her black shorts stood out, nothing was too crazy. She used her hands to make water scythes and attack the boy on the other side. He was frantically trying to keep up, launching quick fire attacks at him. She spun and slashed his chest, causing him to fall to the ground. Winner Ameno. In the arena, the 2 boys stood across from one another and said, next Ayan Ningyo versus Gaara. The proctor's fear of Gaara was evident to him. However, Ayan felt uneasy but not afraid when she looked at the other boy. For something else he was unable to identify. Begin. Sand emerged from Gaara's rear. He didn't call forth Kinja until the sand was about to crash into him. The snake-shaped puppet sped across the sand and made its way directly to Gaara. Gaara got a stick down from the puppet. Sand flew out and wrapped itself around it just as its teeth were ready to bite him. The snake broke the sand with a flick of his hands and then wrapped itself around Ayan. He called forth Byako by tossing another scroll into the air. The tiger puppet was moving at amazing speeds. He used his left to control the tiger and his right to control the snake. Yura couldn't understand. The 2 boys were now facing each other. Ayan was using his other puppet to attack Gaara while riding his snake puppet across the field. Gaara was making every effort to continue the battle. Even though his final defense was holding firm, some hits managed to get through. There were holes in his second defense, and he was growing impatient. How come Rasa hadn't cancelled yet? Gaara's defense enveloped him from both sides, and he froze. He lifted his arms, trying to defend himself. Ayan didn't appear above him until the sand began to pull away. He flipped, kicked Gaara hard in the head, and then rolled away. Then he mounted his snake and rode it across the arena. As Gaara got to his feet, the need for blood began to set in, only for the match to be called by his alleged father. Ayan watched in agony as the boy left. Even though he had defeated him, Ayan wasn't a moron. He recognized that boy after seeing the sand. The boy with the demon inside of him was Gaara. Soon as covert tool, the boy might have gone into a rage and the cage would have had to intervene if he had pushed too hard. I hope he won't have to battle him once more. However, he questioned whether he would be able to speak with him once more. Ayan observed all the other kids as he made his way to the other possible genin. The majority were older than him. He'd been away from other children a lot. His mother is fiercely guarding him. At first, she believed that his presence here protected him. But Ayan didn't know what. He had never left the city. Not that he even knew who his father was. 4 years before, there were fragments of Ayan's new puppet all over the place. He had a small Futsumiki on the stand above his desk. He began shaping the teeth into sharp points and attaching them to the puppet's head. The main body of the intricate design was made up of multiple pieces that gave it movement and a lifelike feel. He used his own chakra to strengthen the wood used to make its outer body. It was lovely. When Granny saw his work, she was astounded by her great-grandson's inventiveness. His dedication and work ethic were amazing. However, it did not alleviate her concern for the boy. Fear that he would be taken by her son. Fear that he would use her infant Ayan as a puppet. But there was also his obsession with his puppets. He was constantly sketching his designs. He had even been taught by his mother. This includes taijutsu, kenjutsu, and kenjutsu. She was transforming him into a fighter capable of taking on his father. Chio wished that he was a boy. In the village, make friends. Learn to be a child and be normal. He might eventually meet someone who could make him do that. The tiger rose from Ayan's chakra strings and exclaimed, "Granny Chio. Look." His eyes glistened with passion and awe. "It's so pretty. I can't wait to practice with it." No, her baby didn't have to be concerned about becoming less human. Ayan's heart was filled with love. Simply put, he wasn't yet prepared to show the world. "Hey Granny," Ayan said to his grandmother as she placed a bowl of fried rice in front of him. Who was my daddy? Why is he gone?" she asked, her eyes welling with tears as she moved closer to the boy. When she saw how much he resembled her little Sasori at the moment, she said, "Your dad was a great ninja. He was so powerful that he fended off entire nations alone out in the sands protecting Suna." As she watched Ayan's shoulders slump, she asked, "Really?" With hope in his eyes. "He is gone now though. His heart just couldn't take the pain held for so long. Does he hate me?" Chio wasn't sure how to respond at first. Sasori didn't seem to despise this adorable boy, in her opinion. She was actually concerned that he might attempt to make him immortal in his own eyes. "He loved you more than anything in this world. More than every grain of sand in our desert." Now, Ayan never received a response to his repeated questions about his father's identity. He only knew that he would be more powerful than him. He would grow into someone he would be proud of and assist Suna in becoming a village where parents are not taken away. It wasn't until the very end that Ayan realized how many people had been called. That is all of the passing shinobi. Everyone else is dismissed for the day. Ayan was perplexed. He had demonstrated his strength by passing every test. Why was he being sent away? Everyone froze when Ayan yelled, "Sir, I think you missed me." But Gaara kept a close eye on things. The boy who battled him was undoubtedly deserving of a spot on a genin team. The proctor smirked as he looked down at the boy and asked, "What makes you say that?" Ayan glared back at the shinobi, saying, "Because I fought the Cage's son. I even held back my best puppet and my sealing jutsu. I deserve to be a ninja." Some jerk would not intimidate him. However, the Cage observed from his perch in the meantime. Like his son on the other side of these other whelps, he was fascinated. He had never witnessed anyone in his era not being terrified of his son. The moment the sand appeared, he knew that this puppeteer had discovered who he was up against. He did not, however, cower, run away, or plead for forgiveness. No, he stood his ground and fought. Either that was excellent, or it would be problematic. Could this child end up like his dad? What if he chooses to emulate Sasori of the Red Sand? Will they be able to stop him when he gets older? Do you now? Or are you merely a replica of your father? He asked, raising his hand as he stood up. You showed us your skill. Yet what of your own bloodlust? The Cage said, using his sand to drop down to the boy. What of it knowing who your father was? He stepped in front of the young boy. The crowd fell silent. Ayan's eyes widened at the man in front of him. He was aware of his father. The Cage was aware of it, and it seemed that he wasn't a good man. Perhaps he was mistaken to come here. He might have been better off not becoming a ninja. Rasa grinned and gave him a headband, saying, "Let's see how you do. Then we'll decide what to do with you." Though he wasn't sure what to think, Ayan decided not to question it just yet. No, he would celebrate with his mother at home. Ayan grinned proudly as he opened the door to their modest home and exclaimed, "Mom. Look, I'm a shinobi now." His mother exclaimed, "I'm so proud of you, Ayan," as she ran up and put her arms around her young son. "Thanks, "Mom," she exclaimed. His mother stepped back and placed her hands on his shoulders. "Thanks, Mom. I can add these to my puppets," Anne said with a gentle smile. "I made sure to buy you those pieces you were asking me for." Her smile grew wide with delight. Glancing down at her eager boy, she asked, "What is it you want to add?" "Well, I am going to put them in Byako and Futsumaki," he said, almost vibrating as he pulled out the little darts. "These will shoot from their backs. I even made a new poison with the help of Granny," he said, smiling even more as he took out the chakra metal. "I'm going to test these inside them. The chakra-infused metal should let me use my own chakra in my puppets, making them highly powerful." Anne tried giving his mother puppy dog eyes, but it didn't work. She shook her head affectionately and said, "That's great. Now before you work on your puppets, you know the rules. Kenjutsu and Fuinjutsu practice first. After, I want you to work on using your chakra chains." Before heading outside to go through his kata, she crossed her arms and gave him a stern look that made him submit. Drawing his two tanto, he began moving, executing his footwork and striking each necessary target. Kyatsu watched as her son moved from one exercise to the next. He wasn't the strongest kid in terms of strength. He was fast though, exceptionally bright and skilled with his puppets. Chio had him practice with a lot of the puppets his father had made when he was younger. He adored those puppets at first. He then began berating them for making noises that sounded like load chittering when they were moved. He began creating puppets with more effective bodies as a result. He was a genius for his age, according to Chio. Something she was also afraid of. Even so, he was concerned despite his capacity to make lethal weapons. His goal was to assist the villagers. Ayan was a good boy. "I've always wanted to make friends, but I don't know how to do it." She wished that he would eventually meet someone who could assist him in establishing a genuine connection. Not with his puppets, either. But he was really bashful when they weren't at home. That was partly her fault, she supposed. Later that evening, Kyatsu went to her infant's workstation and discovered him unconscious. He was nearly finished repairing his small Futsumaki puppet. His blueprints were scattered everywhere. The designs for his other puppets were the same. If he hadn't concentrated on creating kinja, some of them would have already been constructed. The enormous snake was a formidable puppet. She had never seen anything like it. However, his Shinigami was more powerful than even that. Shinigami was a puppet the size of a human. It had a strong scythe in its hands. Unlike his others, it was composed of a different substance. The steel body was almost impregnable. Before she could find out where he was, she had witnessed it sever dozens of targets in a matter of seconds thanks to its exceptional speed and cutting power. Without her sensory skills, anyway. Something that, regrettably, he had not received. The mother picked Ayan up and led him to his room. Kyatsu kissed him on the forehead and walked away grinning broadly as she placed him on his own bed and ruffled his hair, saying, "I hope you find the world, my baby boy." As the other red-haired boy was tucked into his bed, Gaara's eye watched. His heart was a state of confusion. His mother desired his blood. However, he sensed something strange inside his chest. A curiosity he was unable to completely suppress. The boy was not trusted by his father, which made Gaara's situation considerably worse. That alone made him want to trust the boy. This boy was reportedly the son of Suna's most well-known missing nin. The Red Sand Sasori. Kankuro told Tamari that since he was the son of a murderer and a traitor, he shouldn't be permitted to be a shinobi, that he would resemble him exactly. Gaara became even more interested in him as a result. Puppets could never turn this child into a murderer like him. No, he would observe. Gaara would observe and wait to determine whether he would develop into a valuable target. He might be able to ruin him. But something was bugging him from within. Against the voice of the mother, he had a feeling that he should make an effort to speak with the boy. Perhaps he would speak with his dad. "See if you can get to know this boy better." A raven landed beside him, and Sasori looked up in the meantime. He picked up the letter and saw it was from Yura, his sleeper agent. It seems that his son would now become a sand shinobi. His chest was full of joy. The power of his art would be taught to his son. His legacy would be him. The thought of his son excited him, and he said, "Soon we will meet. Then you will join me, or become one of my most powerful puppets." Running to her son's room, Kyatsu hurried. A message had been delivered by a chunin. Ayan was scheduled to meet his new team at the Cage office. Despite her happiness for her baby boy, Kyatsu was unable to stop worrying. He would have plenty of opportunities to get Ayan because he would be in and out of the village so frequently. But she would respect her son's desires. He had the courage to improve the sand and was talented beyond his years. Ayan, she shook her son gently awake and said, "Baby, I have a message for you." He opened his eyes gradually. His eyes cleared of the fog. He glanced around before noticing the scroll she was holding. He leapt to his feet and snatched up his mother's letter, exclaiming, "Oh my God! I get to meet my team." He hurriedly sealed his puppets after getting out of bed. All his mother saw when she ran into his closet was clothing flying out. Her son made her laugh uncontrollably. He wore a red vest over his regular shirt as he left. "How do I look?" he asked, grinning as he put black gloves on his hands and ruffled his hair. "You look wonderful, hun." She put her arms around her son and kissed the top of his head, saying, "My big strong ninja." He laughed and put on his headband, saying, "Bye mama. I'll see you later." Ayan sprinted through the village as quickly as he could. He couldn't wait to meet his team. He had dreamed of this since he was a young child. He was now one of the Sand's shinobi, one of the soldiers of Sunagakur. He was unable to contain his excitement and happiness. He got butterflies when he saw the Cage office. The building was amazing in its sheer size. It wasn't the tallest, but it was a few stories high. It had a round ball on top that was nearly flat. As he entered, he glanced around and noticed the statues of the former Cage. Each of the four demonstrates a strength and power that leads to their majesty. Rasa, the fifth Hokage, was also strong. He had previously witnessed him fight the Sand Demon. 3 years prior. To find something to eat, Ayan wandered around the village. The village was the destination of his mother's mission. She was too important to visit too frequently because she was one of the few jonin in the village. Kyatsu was a proficient kanouchi in both kenjutsu and fuinjutsu. Among the best in the community. She had even offered to repair Shikaku's Jinchuriki's seal. She hadn't asked to do it since, though, and Rasa hadn't yet trusted her. His nose was suddenly filled with the aroma of udon. As his mouth began to water, he approached the tiny eatery. He entered and was greeted by the proprietor. She was an elderly, slender woman. There were strands of gray in her long black hair. She had a white bandana in her hair and was dressed in a brown kimono. She looked the boy up and down and said, "Well, hello little one. I am Aika and welcome to Tomatsukage. I don't know you but you look mighty familiar." He grinned and hoped to approach her. "Hello, I'm Ayan Kingyo. My mama is a ninja, so you probably know her. Kyatsu Uzumaki," she said. She waved the young boy to a seat at the counter, picked him up, and sat him down. "Now what would you like for dinner?" she asked, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Oh yes, I know your mother. I knew your father too." He got to work and watched as the cook behind the counter prepared his meal. Do you have Marutan udon?" the elderly woman asked, laughing, calling the cook over and instructing him to bring her a bowl of the dish. "Of course I do. I have very good suppliers, you know." Almost jumping with delight at the aroma of the food. Before he knew it, Aika had placed the food in front of him. "Thank you Aika-sama, this is amazing," he said with a huge smile as he dug into the noodles and nearly melted. "So tell me, what do you like to do for fun, dearie?" she asked, unable to contain her laughter. She froze for a moment before shaking her head slightly when he said, "I like to train to be a ninja. With puppets and swords. In between bites." "So your mom trains you?" Ayan was not another Sasori, as was clear from their conversation. "Yup," she said, pronouncing the P, "and my great-granny Chio." She had finally noticed it. When Lady Chio was younger, he looked a lot like her. Hopefully, the shinobi world won't turn him into a hopeless and dark person like it did her old friend. "Your mother is raising you alone and being one of our top jonin. I think I can afford this without you, boy." Ayan tried to pay after finishing his meal, but Aika refused, saying, "Now go enjoy your day." Ayan couldn't help but feel happy when someone complimented his mother. He started to head home after climbing to the rooftops when he heard a roar. An enormous sand raccoon showed up a few blocks away. Sand flew at the buildings, slamming them into near emptiness. In the streets below, he heard screams. His feet would move even though all he wanted to do was run. He was motionless. As gold sand flew in the opposite direction, tears welled up in his eyes. Smashing and encircling the creature with a tail, he fell to the streets below as the monster swung its tail in an attempt to escape, smashing the roof he was on, observing as its yellow and black eyes locked with his own, preventing him from reacting when he nearly fell to the ground. He felt arms encircle him just before he struck. They were robust and made of wood. He turned to face Granny Chio and saw that her chakra strings were drawing him back to her. Now, Ayan will always remember that altercation. In the exams, he had performed well against Gaara. But he was aware that he would never have prevailed if that had been revealed. Not until he produced a better product. A puppet so powerful that, like the fifth Hokage, he could stop it, or produces enough potent puppets to level the terrain. Recognizing the other ninjas who had gone by the day before. To be honest, the majority weren't particularly memorable. He didn't believe he was superior to them. No, they all believed they were superior to him. Due to the fact that they were all older. He was the same age as that boy, with the exception of Gaara. Ayan, Kingyo and Shira, they exclaimed as they approached and examined the young child. Ayan glanced at the 14-year-old as the ninja sighed and went on, "You've been summoned by Kazekage-sama." He had light skin, brown eyes, and spiky gray hair. The boy was dressed in light brown pants and a light blue collared shirt that were fastened together with a gray sash. As the two boys walked to the other room, everyone scowled. As they entered, they noticed two elderly genin. One, Ayan could recognize easily. Granny Chio also trained Konkuro Kazekage. He was also an accomplished puppeteer, she said. He wasn't quite as good as Ayan, though, according to her. He was despised by the boy. He's always maintained that he shouldn't be permitted to be a shinobi. But it's not like anyone ever explained why. There was a blonde girl standing next to him. He had previously seen this person with the Kazekage. Usually when he's speaking. Though he didn't know her name, Ayan was certain that she was the sister of Gaara and Konkuro. He was aware that she was a wind user, though. As it was a common feature in the village, it was one of many. "Come in, you two." As they entered, they noticed Gaara gazing at Ayan. He gave me a fierce, resentful look. Shira had no trouble allowing the puppet user to speak as Ayan finally looked away from the Jinchuriki and said, "Thank you for seeing us, Kazekage-sama." He nodded as he looked them over. "Normally I don't think much of low chakra taijutsu users." Shira lowered his head in an attempt to avoid his stare. "You however were impressive, so I'll give you the chance." He turned to face Ayan and said, "Now you son of the red sand." Ayan froze. "Sand that's red." He looked over and saw fear on Shira's face. Did they mean Sasori of the red sand? "You showed much promise and no fear of my youngest. Which is why you two will be on his genin team." He couldn't hold the other boy responsible. "What?" exclaimed all three of the Kazekage children. "He is our brother, he needs to be on our team." Rasa shot them a look that immediately put an end to their cries. "I've made my decision. You two will be moved to Kyotsu Uzumaki. Baki, you now are in charge of my youngest and his two teammates." "Yes, Kazekage. Come you three." Gaara and Ayan immediately followed. Shira followed, observing the sand user's expression, which was one of pure terror. Baki led them to a narrow ledge outside the village. He cursed his own bad luck as he looked down at the village. Gaara simply stared at him as he turned to face his new team and said, "All right. I'm Baki. I'll be your Jonin sensei from now on. You will do as I say at all times. Are we clear?" "Hi," was the response from the other two. Before continuing, he rubbed his forehead and said, "I have no family, but I am proficient in taijutsu and wind release. I am also proficient in fuinjutsu, though not as much as Ayan's mother. Now you." After exchanging glances with Shira, Ayan said, "I am Ayan Kingyo. I am skilled in puppetry, kenjutsu, and fuinjutsu. I also have a hidden jutsu that is unique to my family." 4 golden chains emerged from his back without any further explanation. Gaara's gaze expanded. When he saw them, he felt somewhat at ease, but he heard his mother telling him not to let them catch him. Following their return, Shira emerged from his reverie and said, "I am Shira. I am skilled only in taijutsu, though I do have enough chakra control to walk up walls and water walk." Baki examined them and said, "We will test your abilities now. Gaara, I know what you're able to do. I need to see the other two though." He dropped into a fighting stance and turned to face the gray-haired boy, saying, "Shira. You're first." Shira nodded and said, "Begin." Shira took the lead. He was incredibly fast. Baki dodged a kick that was aimed at his face and punched out. To his surprise, however, the boy blocked with ease. In an attempt to find an opening, Shira delivered powerful and fluid punches and kicks. Baki ducked or blocked every blow. However, he would never acknowledge the pain of the attacks. This child struck like a freight train. But Baki observed the boy's movements. Shira moved his body in a certain way, unpredictably twisting without losing any of his power. He undoubtedly got ideas from it about how to help this boy intensify his attacks. He had very little chakra. Even he was aware of that, but he would be a formidable opponent if he could help him develop the small chakra. Shira stood up nervously and said, "You have incredible taijutsu skills. I know you don't have much chakra. Barely enough to form any ninjutsu." Shira's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded in agreement. Shira caught the boy's kick and spun him to the ground, saying, "Good, that's enough." Baki chuckled. "However, I see why the cage finally allowed someone like you. We will come up with something to help you become someone terrifying." With a huge smile and wonder in his eyes, Shira looked up at the man and said, "Thank you, Baki-sensei." Baki briefly grinned before turning to face Ayan and saying, "You're up, puppet user. I want to see this kenjutsu first." "Yes, sensei." Baki kept a close eye on him. Ayan was little. There was something carefree about him. He was feared in the village, just like Gaara. Few made an effort to keep the boy happy, ensure that he has no reason to leave the village. For years, his father has been a missing nin, a serious danger to the village and the cage. There couldn't be two of them out there. But that carefree attitude vanished when Ayan moved across from him. Now in front of him was the aura of a murderer. Baki nearly froze when he said, "As I crank up the fight, I want you to up your arsenal. Bring in what puppets you want." Ayan had strapped his Tonto to his lower back. He is removing the handle from his right side. He felt his confidence rising as he reached down and felt the grip in his hand. All other feelings vanished into thin air. He was aware of his height. He was aware of his uniqueness. He became enraged after learning who his father was. How could he be unaware? How could his mother have kept it from him? Begin. He stole the kunai from his sensei by drawing the Tonto, swiftly responding with a few quick, tiny movements. He moved fluidly, avoiding and thwarting the larger shinobi's attacks. He barely avoided the attack by sliding under his arm. Baki was surprisingly quick. He moved swiftly, and his strength allowed him to knock Ayan's arms aside. Baki's mouth blew wind, causing Ayan to fall to the ground. He lost control of his Tonto and it rolled away. He rolled back to his feet and watched as Baki vanished. He called forth Bayuko by pulling out a scroll. The puppet of a tiger landed before him. He had the puppet's strong jaw instinctively bite down on the kunai, shattering him. For a brief moment, Baki was taken aback. He swerved to avoid the claws and then flipped away. He made the decision to destroy the puppet. Wind release, blade of wind. Just as he was ready to strike the tiger, a huge puff of smoke materialized. He smiled as he felt the satisfying smash of something, but was struck away by a wooden snake's tail. He was standing when he noticed the snake defensively coiling around Ayan and the other puppet. Baki was impressed. This child had a strong fighting instinct. To put it mildly, his kenjutsu was quite good. He lacked Chunin skill, though. But when it came to his puppets, he was simply amazing. This was unlike anything he had observed in the village's other puppet users. Anyhow, outside of Chiyo-sama, his custom puppets were powerful, and his skills were frightening. However, it was insufficient. He was hoping for more. Bayuko smirked as he charged at him and used the hand signals to say, "Wind release, great breakthrough." Ayan was unsurprised by the wind attack's sheer strength. As it flew, Bayuko lost the chakra strings. To keep himself upright, he held himself to the kinja with his other chakra strings. The force of the attack also made Shira and Gaara freeze. Gaara was aware of Baki's strength, but not to this degree. Beside him, Ayan's eyes shifted sideways as Baki delivered a forceful blow that caused him to lose control of kinja. In front of him, Baki reappeared. He was hit by his foot coming up. Chains sprang out of reflex, encircling the man and slamming him to the ground. Ayan called forth Futsumaiki as they withdrew. He dropped into a defensive stance, holding his puppet in his right hand and a kunai in his left. The blow had left Ayan's body aching. With that attack, Sensei hadn't held back. After getting up and dusting him off, Baki looked at the boy and said, "Enough for now. I can see your resolve." The group gathered, and the boy said, "Hi Sensei," after looking at his teammates. "Shira, you're far behind you contemporaries. Both Gaara and Ayan could easily compete with Chunin and even some Jonin. You were behind, though." Ayan and Shira nodded, saying, "Our team will be unlike others. Tomorrow we will start on C-rank missions." Just being there seemed to make both of them happy. "Gaara, Shira, you are both dismissed. Ayan, I need to talk with you." The puppet user seemed to have completely changed. Shira cast a worried glance at Ayan. The taller boy nodded and left the puppet user with their sensei after the puppet user grinned at him and said, "I'll be okay. I'll see you tomorrow, Shira-kun." Baki gave him a downward glance, waiting until he realized he was by himself. Aien's attitude shifted, becoming stoic at once. I wasn't for you becoming a shinobi. Aien's heart raced as he said, in fact when the council told us of you and your mother I voted to have you executed. He was practically inviting the challenge. I don't understand why the Cage wants you to be a ninja. Why he'd give the chance to have you become a threat to our village. Aien clenched his fists, observing the strain on the boy's face. Tears were building up as frustration boiled under the surface. He felt like shouting at him. Give him a punch. It was too much to handle. However, Aien said, freezing his glossy eyes as he gazed up at the partially covered face. I may have been wrong. I saw you have the same look in battle as Sasori. Except you're not the same. Outside of battle there is a joy in your eyes. I may not agree with you being a shinobi but this is your chance to prove me wrong. Don't make me have to kill you in the future. Aien walked past the boy without turning around, sat down, and put his arms around his knees. Hearing about who his father was not once but twice. How killing him was discussed. He couldn't take it as he sobbed into his thighs. Tears pouring out covering his dry pants. Gaara brushed his sand eye aside. That boy resembled him, and he listened to the entire thing. A misfit for his father's use. Because of what he could become, no one wanted him to be a ninja. He's not like you. He might be a monster's son. However, you are a monster. Show me that you exist by getting me his blood. He noticed his mother hadn't arrived home when he walked through the front door. She should return shortly from another B-rank mission. He entered his room and examined his designs. His nose began to drip water onto the desk. He got up and began constructing a new puppet. The design of this one was feminine. The figure was tall and wore flowing white robes. The face reminded him of his Shinigami. The eyes and mouth were connected by brown lines on the light mask. The arms concealed long mantis blades. He also designed the ribbon that was wrapped around the upper arms and neck. He could use his own chakra to control them through the puppet if they performed as he desired. He allowed the puppet to stand up by attaching his chakra strings to its body. With a gentle smile, he allowed his chakra to pass through the puppet and into the strings. The ribbon wrapped around him and flowed up into the sky. Before the betrayal began to seep in once more, warmth filled his chest. It hurt. What kept her from telling him? When Shira arrived at his dad's tiny apartment, he asked, Shira, is that you? He smiled and said, hey dad. Before embracing his son and asking, so how was your new team? Shira sighed slightly and said, they are both really scary. I'm Ona, Gaara's and Aien Kingyo's team. What, you're on the Puppet Kid's team and that monster? His father asked, pausing before kneeling beside his son. He sat on a chair and nodded, saying, Gaara was really scary. Aien was different though. I think we can be friends as long as I don't have to fight him ever. Just be careful my boy. His father was terrifyingly powerful. When he betrayed the village, he killed the Cage. At least that's what they said. He couldn't help but smile at his son and say, I'll be careful, father. I promise. His son was talented and would excel as a ninja. Even though he was afraid of the boys on his team. But he would still stand by his son. Kyatsu was en route to her new team's meeting. Ross's decision to allow her to lead a team astounded her. Since she had arrived in the village all those years ago, he had never trusted her. He never gave her the opportunity, regardless of how many missions she completed. She spent so much time away from her child only to have him within arm's reach. But getting to Suna had been a simple choice. Kyatsu had agonizedly considered going to Konakaga instead when she was younger. Her once clan had a treaty with the Konoha when they had their own village. But that was a long time ago. She was a little girl when the village fell. She'll never forget it either. However, they refused to protect her boy from Sasori. If he came she was sure that they would feed them to the wolves just like they did the Uzumaki. No, she brought him here. To a place that hadn't his father. He would be taken there and made into a weapon. A location that would undoubtedly provide him with everything he required to protect himself from that man. Rasa looked up from his desk as Uzumaki bowed as he entered the Cage office and said, Cage-sama. As he took out a scroll, his expression remained grave. Her eyes widened in surprise as she grasped the scroll. 3 teenagers entered through the open door and said, Welcome Team Kyatsu. Kyatsu Uzumaki, these are your newest genin. Glancing over at the 3 children, she smiled gently and said, Hello Tamari, Konkuro, and Ameno. The children of the Cage were not happy to be here. From the beginning, it was evident. Come on. Let's go somewhere else to talk. Thank you Keisuke-sama. They accompanied her to the top of one of the highest structures in Suna. We are going to get to know each other today. I want to know what you are skilled in, likes, dislikes, and dreams. For instance, I am Kyatsu Uzumaki. I'm a Kenjutsu and Fuinjutsu expert. Not to mention I'm also skilled in wind, water, and fire release. I like my son, training, teaching, and fighting. I hate my ex more than life itself. My dream is to give my son the life he deserves. I'm Konkuro. I am a skilled puppet user and want to be the greatest puppet user our village ever produced. I love training and building new puppets. I hate my father and what he turned my brother into. I dream of getting close with my brother. Quietly said, I am Ameno. I like reading and learning new healing techniques. I hate fighting but will if I must. I'm good at water ninjutsu and medical ninjutsu. My dream is to become the best medical ninja in all of Sand. I'm Tamari. This is pointless but whatever. I am skilled in long-range ninjutsu. Like my brother Konkuro, I hate what our father and the council turned my baby brother into. I will help him become a better person and a strong ninja. Even if he should be on our team. But my son can handle himself. If anyone can fix Gaara's seal at some point, it's either Ayan or myself. All we need is the Keisuke's permission, Kyatsu said, rubbing her forehead. I understand you don't want Gaara on a different team. Not like I'm fond with my son being on a team with a Jinchuriki that has a faulty seal. Tamari glared daggers at the Kanouchi. Tomorrow we begin on D-rank missions. It will only be a few days to get us into some sort of groove. Your father believes you two are both ready for higher mission already. Ameno, I know you are new to this but I promise we will get you caught up. Ayan was outside with his new puppet, slicing through entire groups of puppets with the mantis blades concealed in its arms. He started attempting to move the binding cloth that had fallen off the priestess by pushing his chakra through the chakra strings. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to get it to move correctly. He sat down and looked at the puppet impatiently. He was about to try again when he heard someone say, "Whoa. Ayan, that puppet is beautiful." Ayan turned away from his mother and crossed his arms. He stared up at the blue sky, trying not to cry. It was obvious that something wasn't right. When Kyatsu attempted to touch Ayan's shoulder, he got up and left. As Kyatsu watched her baby boy leave, her chest constricted. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, stopping at his puppet and hastily sealing it. Eventually, Ayan turned to Kyatsu and asked, "Tell you what, sweetie?" His face was wet with tears. Time froze as he looked at his mother and said, "That my father Wasa is Sasori of the Red Sand." He felt betrayed. Although Kyatsu knew her son would simply push her away, she still wanted to run over and embrace him. All this time, the reason everyone was always trying to keep me happy, they'd avoid me, or act like I shouldn't be trained as a shinobi was because they thought I'd be like him. Seeing his mother take a step toward him made him pull back. "Stop, I don't know what to do or say. I'm starting at C-rank missions tomorrow so I don't think I'll be home for a few days." He turned around and went to bed. At the moment, his frustration and rage were exploding. Ayan has never before been genuinely made fun of by his mother. At least not to this degree. He cherished his mother. For him, she was everything. Ayan never imagined that she would keep such a secret from him because he had spent so much time aspiring to be like her. He laid down quickly and considered everything that had transpired. He hadn't even considered his mission because he had been so preoccupied with his mother. He turned over, grinning to himself, and wished for a better day tomorrow. He closed his eyes and considered various applications for his puppets. Perhaps even making something that was unlike anything he had ever used. He allowed the world to fade into obscurity while he was deep in thought. The three genin arrived at the cage's office and awaited their first assignment. Ayan took a seat and took out a notebook. He took out a pen and started sketching various patterns, allowing this to divert his attention for a little while. Before Baki eventually joined them, Gaara kept a close eye on him. "Come, we are heading to a village at our northern border. We are going to deliver a message and return home," Baki said. Shira and Ayan both called out, "Hi." But Gaara simply turned around and started to move. As they walked out of the village, Ayan kept his hands in his pockets. Now he could see the suspicion in the older shinobi's eyes as they looked at him sidelong. At least they didn't give Gaara that look. He could see that it had an impact on him even if the sand user didn't want it to. Ayan approached the other red-headed person as they were leaving the village. "You know who should try to actually talk to it. Gaara remained silent and continued to stare ahead as Shira moved ahead of their sensei, giving him some room. When Ayan turned to face the boy, he said, "My mom talked to me about the tailed beasts. She said that my ancestors the Uzumaki didn't believe them to be monsters. That they are just imprisoned together. I don't know if that all true," Gaara said, glancing at the boy who was gazing off into the desert sky. "If it is though I imagine it be lonely. Trapped away from everyone else. I guess you'd know more about that than anyone." Gaara put his arms on the boy's head and turned to face Gaara. Gaara halted in his tracks and said, "I've heard you call it mother before. I don't know why you do, but it's not your mother. If you two could get along though, maybe he could be an ally for you." Ayan took a moment to smile and said, "You don't like me and that's fine, but when you two are ready I'll help make a seal that will let you two truly work together." Gaara was at a loss for words. The voice in the back of his mind was stunned to silence, leaving his mind confused. Even though he had only known the boy for a few days, he managed to calm him down. Could it not have been his mother? Although Gaara was unaware, he was aware that he desired to be close to the puppet user. The need for blood was no longer being triggered by Ayan. "Why? So Shira, we going to spar a bit? I think my puppets could help in your training, you know." Ayan bumped his shoulder as he caught up to Shira. "Yeah, I don't know. You're really out of my league," Shira said nervously. "Whatever. In no time you'll be just as strong as Gaara and I. Just you wait." Ayan's carefree attitude was enamoring for the boy. He hadn't had anyone to actually believe in him before, particularly a person his own age. Before long, the two boys were discussing their favorite games and snacks. It seems that Shira enjoyed playing Koma, while Ayan enjoyed shogi. They discussed training for various things they could create. Shira was informed of Ayan's proficiency in Fuinjutsu. How he could seal almost anything and with some time could even make a seal that nullifies chakra. Shira preened at that, making everybody in a zone his level would be incredible. Baki listened closely to the boys. He was shocked to hear of them get along so well. Seeing Gaara attempt to creep closer to Ayan was even more startling. There was something contagious about the boy. Baki, however, was still not convinced that this was the true Ayan. He kept thinking about the boy who had spared his life. If forced, Ayan might be a mindless murderer. All Baki needed to do was figure out what set him off. After traveling for 2 days, they had arrived at the village. No one really looked twice at them as they passed. Eventually they were led to a small official building. "What's this, shinobi? What is it that you want with us?" Baki knocked, waiting for a small, round man with gray hair to open up. "My team and I have come to deliver a message that you did not pay your trade agreements with the daimyo." The man immediately started to sweat. "Because of this you will not be receiving addition supplies for your people or their defense." As a kunai flew out at Gaara only to be stopped by sand, Baki's smile turned into a poisonous grin. "What? You can't do that." Baki simply smiled. "Yes he can. We are here to make sure get his message. Loyalty to the daimyo is paramount in the land of wind." He noticed 3 shinobi standing nearby when he glanced over his shoulder. Ayan turned to see 4 ninjas staring down at him from his side. Baki, however, appeared unconcerned. He was about to reply when a man walked up beside him, delivering a powerful blow that sent him hurtling backward. The mountain of a man flew past them, pursuing the Jonin directly. Ayan said to the taijutsu practitioner, "Stay close to my puppet. It will cover you." Futsumaiki materialized in front of them after tossing a scroll into the air. Shira jumped and landed between 2 of the ninja, moving swiftly. A katana was drawn and swung down at him. Futsumaiki's arm stopped the blade as it was about to collide. Shira's foot struck the man with the puppet's leap, which was just high enough to send him crashing into a storefront. He started spinning as 2 of the other shinobi launched a barrage of attacks. The slightly older boy's strength impressed Ayan. There were no gaps in his form, and he was efficient. Futsumaiki took down a ninja with a quick flick of his wrist. A metal rod stabbed the man in the forehead as the jaw opened. Before leaping away from the last ninja, Shira punched a man so hard that he cracked all of his ribs on one side. Water release. Washing tide. A huge wave of water erupted from his hands. Shira was swiftly pulled under. Ayan's right hand sent chakra strings that grabbed Shira and pulled him out of the water as quickly as he could. He dispatched Futsumaiki to look at the enemy. Before its fingers seized the man's Adam's apple and yanked it from his neck, the tiny puppet kicked him in the face. Ayan ran to Shira and asked the boy, "Are you okay?" Shira couldn't resist grinning at him. After helping him, The boys are now fussing over him like a mother hen. I'm good, thank you, Ayan. We work well together. Yeah, we do. Wait till we fight stronger enemies. Ayan exclaimed, laughing as he glanced over at the red, stained sand. 2 of the 4 shinobi had been instantly dispatched by him. He had made no hesitation at all. Abject vomit exploded from his mouth, and he felt his stomach drop. Ayan, what's wrong? The boy asked, shaking his head and pointing as water began to well up in his eyes. Gaara watched as the 3 alleged shinobi attempted to strike him with various blows. Despite throwing explosive tags, one was unable to breach his defense. Another tried a tanto to break through. The blade was easily snatched by his sand and hurled back through his chest. The third attempted water jutsu, which at first slowed his sand down but eventually had no effect. Infuriated, he threw his sand at the water user, saying, "Sand bullet." The 3 shots struck the man, instantly killing him. With a glance at the last ninja, he held up his hand and said, "Sand shuriken." Sand blades whirled toward the last victim. His head was severed from his body by several blows, while the remainder was sliced into ribbons. Baki showed up with the head of the ninja he had just killed and said, "Ayan, don't waste tears on the weak and stupid. Next time don't hire a bunch of washouts. Not a single guard was a true shinobi. To be dispatched so easily by children is disgraceful," he said as he entered the mayor's office once more and placed it on his desk. Baki rolled his eyes and said, "I'm sorry. I'll pay the daimyo back. I promise, just spare me please." Ayan, who was shaken, followed his sensei out the door. "Come on, we are heading back for our pay." As he passed the dead guards in the road, he continued to try not to throw up. Baki turned to face his genin as he left the small village and said, "Good work, team." Ayan and Shira. At attention, both boys stood. "Your first kill is rough. I'm happy to say that your reaction is normal. If anything, I have to say that this reaction is a relief for myself." Ayan nodded, wiping his eyes as he felt Shira's hand on his shoulder, despite Baki's ability to see that he was having difficulty. "You two performed well as a team. Ayan, you held a lot back but in doing so protected your more dangerous techniques. Shira, you fought well and integrated around the puppets naturally." He noticed that the boy was staring at Ayan when he looked at his junchurki. "Gaara, you did well. Now I know it wasn't your first time killing. I was told you tend to be moreya, brutal." The Jonin was unable to understand why he was staring so intently, but it caught his attention. "Why did you hold back?" he asked. "They aren't worthy opponents. They do not prove my existence," Gaara said, crossing his arms almost boredly. The other genin stared at the boy as if he had 2 heads, and for a moment Ayan's heart ached because the boy had no regrets and wanted to give Gaara a hug like his mother had given him. All 3 of them had improved in different ways over the course of the following weeks, which included mostly C-rank missions with a few B-rank ones. Shira's constant sparring with Baki demonstrated his improvement, as their sensei now had to work to get a hit on the boy. Shira's strength and speed had increased to the point where he could make after images of himself. In addition to his almost protective attitude toward his new team, especially Ayan, Gaara had become more submissive. He hadn't had many outbursts since joining their team, and Shukaku, who hadn't heard a human of his kind speak well in more than a century, was also trying to protect the boy, which is why he had been quieter whenever the boy was with them. Gaara was also becoming more accurate and proficient with his sand, even becoming better at defending himself. Shira was quick enough to tag him a few times, not significantly, but enough to show him that he couldn't always rely on his automatic defense. However, in his spars against Ayan, it was different. The boy himself was actually pretty quick, especially with his tanto and chakra chains. They had discovered that up to a certain speed, it was difficult for him to achieve any real defense. But what really startled Gaara was his puppet Shinigami, a demonic-looking puppet with a scythe that was too fast for him to follow. Baki struggled with it a few times, and if he had used it in conjunction with, say, Kinja, even Baki would have struggled with Ayan. Speaking of the puppet user, he had become much more adept at taking action. On their most recent B-rank mission, they were pursued by shinobi from Iowa, who were after secrets that the boys were taking to Sunakager. To his surprise, Ayan vanished from view, and he killed 2 of the ninja with ease using his puppets. The 3rd ninja found him and tried to kill him and stop the puppets at their source, but he was unaware that Ayan was a skilled close fighter, and he and Byako easily defeated the Chunin. Last but not least, he made 2 new puppets, which were meant to serve as support. He claimed to have gotten the idea from his grandmother Chiyo, and he used them to protect himself from his allies if they were pinned down. Shinigami and Tenyo wore white robes that covered most of their bodies, and their right arms were used for offense, with holes in them that shot poison darts, and when their arms opened up, mantis-like blades seemed to sever enemies. Ayan went to his workshop to work on his puppets after returning from another B-ranked mission. Kinja had suffered some serious damage in their previous mission, and the shinobi he had fought was extremely skilled in kenjutsu. He pulled off some of the scales and hummed to himself as he looked inside, so preoccupied that he hadn't heard his mother enter. "Hey sweetie." He paused and gazed uncertainly up at his mother. "I know you're still mad. I just wanted you to know that I took the necessary precautions to keep you safe. Granny did, too. You should see her if you haven't already." He sighed, crossed his arms, and rested his head on them as she kissed him on the forehead and walked out of the room. It's been nearly 2 months. Ayan was extremely irritated with them. He had come to terms with the fact that they were attempting to assist him, but he didn't understand if they were afraid he would become like his father or if they didn't trust him to be his own person. Sasori was a hero for a while, so he assumed it was justified. It's difficult to not admire someone who was able to stop Iwa and Konoha on his own during the previous conflict. He got up, packed his belongings, and decided to follow his mother's advice because he hadn't seen Granny in a few months and she didn't deserve to be treated disrespectfully. He pouted the entire way up to the mountain top where she lived, but as he turned a corner, he ran into Gaara and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Gaara. I ought to pay attention. Why aren't you afraid of me?" The red-headed man asked, looking at him with a hint of bewilderment. "Or my demon?" Ayan was taken aback by the forwardness of his teammate. It was true he really wasn't afraid anymore. His mom had given him ways to fight against tailed beasts just in case. "It's why she focused so much on Fuinjutsu, because you're my teammate. We must rely on one another, and ever since your father revealed the identity of my donor, I can't help but feel that we are alike." Gaara said in a matter-of-fact tone, "You may be born of a monster but I am one." Ayan, however, ignored the remark, saying, "No, you're what your father made you. You know that you and the beast within you can be anything you want to be. Or if you want to become protectors and change how the village sees you, then you can." Gaara gazed down at his hands, which had killed numerous people and could have killed almost everyone in the village. "If you want to be psycho-murderers, then you can. If you want to be hermits and hide from the world, then you can." When Gaara looked up at the puppet user, he felt tears for the first time in years. He was unsure if the other boy was truly different, but the monster inside of him was echoing the same feeling of the need to protect this son-child. Ayan's chest ached as he saw the tears welling up in the other boy's eyes, and he realized that no one had ever trusted him. I know this is strange, but can I give you a hug?" Gaara was so taken aback that all he could do was nod. His world seemed to slow down as Ayan's arms encircled him. He couldn't recall the last time he had experienced such warmth outside of blood. How this other boy was so willing to support him. Slowly, he lifted his arms and wrapped them around the other boy's waist. Placing his head on Ayan's shoulder, Gaara couldn't help but cry silently. Rasa watched from a distance, but he did nothing. The cage hadn't sent any assassins after his son in a while. Gaara was changing, and it wasn't too difficult to see. Baki was one of the few strong enough to prevent a complete transformation, so he put the man in charge of his youngest. To Rasa's surprise, however, he had received reports over their time on missions that his son was changing. He was becoming more grounded, accurate, and effective. He had never before imagined that his son would start regaining his sanity. Maybe I should let the boy's mother look at his seal. Before he faded, he mused to himself. The Jinchuriki wanted to go home, but Ayan had offered to let Gaara accompany him. He said he had some things to think about, so he left, letting the puppet user go alone. Ayan wouldn't object, though, because he needed to speak to Granny alone, without his friends to interfere. When he arrived, he noticed Chio sitting at her own desk, adjusting her arm and humming to herself before saying, "You might as well come in, child. Simply staring is a waste of time." Ayan said softly, "Hey Granny." As he drew closer, her nerves suddenly kicked in, and she turned in her chair to face the boy. "So your mother told me that you know about your father. I'm sure you have questions," Ayan said, nodding before bringing up a chair beside her. Working and talking were things she knew all too well, so when Ayan pulled out one of his scrolls with parts for his Shinigami, Chio laughed and asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" As Ayan pulled out what appeared to be a whip-like tail for the puppet, Chio noticed the bewilderment in his eyes and said, "I was worried you'd try to be like him." For a moment, Ayan raised her head and asked, what was he like? Chiyo frowned. He was a broken and wounded boy all the time. The Second Great Shinobi World War claimed the lives of his parents, defeated by the White Wolf of Konoha. It ruined him. His parents were the subjects of his first puppets. The younger puppet user was no longer employed at this point. He later got a friend. In fact, he's his best friend. In the midst of the Third World War. At the time of his death, they were keeping the Northern Front intact. Sasori was unable to handle it. He transformed his body into a puppet, establishing an enduring friendship with him. The thought of taking the dead and turning them into puppets made Ayan's skin crawl. Seeing this filled the old lady with some relief. Your mother wanted to tell you. However, your great uncle and I decided against it. We reasoned that it would either do one of two things. You would either strive to emulate him or succumb to the pressure of bringing honor back to our family. Did she want to tell me, then? Chiyo looked at his grandmother and wiped away the tears of joy. Thank you for telling me, he said, nodding. Kyatsu agreed that you shouldn't know until you were ready, but she hated keeping it from you. Chiyo smiled and gave her great-grandson a strong embrace, saying, just watch out. Eventually, he will come get you. Especially when he hears how good of a puppet user you are, Ayan thought to himself as he was leaving. He wouldn't let himself fall for that, though. He'd be ready and make sure that his friends were ready too. He had to go apologize to his mother first, and then they had to go to the Casecage's office to change his name. Going forward, he would be Ayan Uzumaki. Gaara got home to see his siblings were eating dinner without him. Both got nervous seeing their baby brother. Not that he didn't deserve it. Sitting down, he sat silently for a moment. He wasn't sure what he wanted to say. Tamari picked up on this. Gaara, what's wrong? Do you believe I could serve as a guard? Kankuro dropped his chopsticks in surprise. Tamari, confused, asked, why? Do you want to? Gaara, where did this even originate? Fiddling his thumbs, the Jinchuriki couldn't look his older siblings in the eyes. Ayan. I have a choice in what I want to be, he said. That both the demon and I do. I simply don't know. What if, like you guys, people are constantly terrified of me? When Kankuro awoke from his daze, he said, Gaara, you are our younger brother. Yes, we are a little afraid of you. But if you want to be something different, we will do whatever it takes to make sure you can. Gaara sat in silence for a little while longer before saying, almost monotonely, thank you. He then went to his room. Turning to his sister, Kankuro said, I think we need to meet this kid. Tamari gave him a gentle smile and said, yeah, we do. Perhaps his inclusion on Gaara's team was a good thing. Ayan felt more secure as she walked home. They had fought a wide variety of foes in the 2 months he had been on his team. The majority weren't very impressive. Weak ninjas who were disapproved of by their target villages, or their simple bandits who knew very little about chakra. They hadn't faced any significant difficulties despite their battles with the Iwa to the north. However, none of the more significant missions had been accessible to their team. Ever since his conversation with Granny Chiyo, though, he had grown more confident. His father was Sasori. However, Ayan would not be like him. No, he now had a goal in place. Surpassing his father in strength and emerging as one of Sunakaga's strongest defenders. He knew that Gaara and Shira would assist him in this. All he had to do now was figure out how to assist Gaara. When he got home, he paused in front of the front door. The puppet user hadn't had a meaningful conversation with his mother in a long time. He had been so furious that he had failed to consider the extent of his harm to her. Knowing that she had wanted to tell him about Sasori, however, made his chest feel warm. As he walked up to the door, he couldn't help but smile affectionately. He opened the door to the house and saw his mother seated at the dining table. She had been working on a new seal, which she was reviewing. He approached the table quietly and took a seat across from her. The right side of her face was hidden by her long red hair. Even so, the genin was infected by his mother's smile. I want to change my name to Uzumaki. What, are you sure? The sealing expert asked in shock. I talked to Granny like you wanted me to. She told me everything and I am sorry, Mom. Ayan nodded and took out his own scroll, which contained his Byaku puppet. Kyatsu dropped her work and walked around the table. You have no reason to be sorry, sweetie. We kept a secret from you, and you have every right to be angry by that, she said, putting her arm around her son and drawing him into a tight embrace. I know, but I get it now. You were just trying to be there for me. Which is why I want you last name. Kyatsu said, tears in her eyes as she said goodbye to her son, then I need you to know about all of the Uzumaki. The comfort of his mother's arms was like a blanket wrapped around him. The Uzumaki clan was famous. Beyond famous actually. We were a clan of fuinjutsu experts. A clan that rivaled Konokaga's Senju and Uchiha. Ayan drew a chair right in front of him and said, "We stayed neutral in most conflict and established our own village. When I was a little girl the village was Atis KD. I was a newly anointed genin." Ayan was aware of the power of their clan, but the extent of Konoha's most renowned clans was insane. Uzukagire's fall. Kyatsu looked up and noticed her sensei, Hattori Uzumaki. "Sensei, what's going on?" she asked. He wore his long red hair in a single braid. He wore gauntlets and greaves that matched his green armor chest plating. As they followed him to the back of the city, her two teammates said, "We are evacuating. Civilians are being led out of the city." "Everyone?" I asked, turning to face Shinto. He was confused, saying, "What a boo." A huge boulder destroyed the house next to them before the Uzumaki could escape what he wanted to, saying, they broke through the front line. Each of the three genin called forth their chain of chakras, causing them to collide with the approaching shinobit. As they charged in, their sensei swiftly and effectively leapt in front of them, killing them. He turned to the genin after a brief pause. "In the village, fires were breaking out. It's too late. You need to run. 3 enemy villages are here to destroy us. This can't be the end of the Uzumaki. Go leave. Don't look back," screamed everyone as buildings collapsed throughout the village. The 3 genin turned and fled, going first to their residences. Kyatsu had lost his house. Her parents were dead in front of the house, along with her older brother. Shinto was abandoned by his family after they ran away. "Go, I'll catch up, I promise." Hugging her friends, she entered the altercation with her family while Taiyuki, their other teammate, was still fighting. As her friend engaged in a vicious battle with the enemy shinobi, Kyatsu turned to look back. The 2 genin finally made it out of the village. Fighting noises in the background vanished. She asked Shinto, "Where are we going to go?" As the 2 genin paused to rest after taking cover, he said with a stern expression, "I don't know." Now, Ayan gave his mother a startled look. Her face was ridden with pain. "We threatened the entirety of the ninja world. So they banned to destroy us. Our name still holds some weight. I've found few survivors but they are no longer ninja." Ayan smiled confidently and said, "Well, I'm going to give them a reason to know our name again." His mother laughed. "But I have one question. What happened to Shinto?" Ayan's mother said, "That's a story for another time. Come on, let's get to the Shinobi archives and get your name changed," he said with a smile. Ayan saw Gaara and Shira when he arrived at the meeting spot for his team. He hopped over to them and placed a copy of a document in front of them. "Uzumaki Ayan, you changed your name?" Shira asked, holding the paper with a perplexed expression. Gaara's expression was emotionless as she said, "That seems like a waste of energy." However, Ayan smiled at the Jinchuriki, causing his brain to short-circuit, and said, "Yup. Figured I'd change it seeing how I don't want to deal with my deadbeat dad anyways." "Well, I like it," exclaimed Shira. "It reminds me of your mom. She is pretty cool." Ayan asked his friend inquisitively, "You know who my mom is?" Shira laughed. "Yeah, my best friend got put on her team with the Cage's kids. She has helped her a lot with her healing skills and even started helping her develop her own water ninjutsu." As they discussed the puppet boy's mother, Gaara listened. She was apparently strong, competent in both kenjutsu and fuinjutsu. Gaara looked at Ayan once more and committed it to memory. The boy simply exuded happiness. Not just something different from him. With each puppet user he encountered, it was unique. Not to mention how many puppets he had. They were created by Ayan's father, and even his brother only had 3. Baki showed up while they were chatting. "Today we are not going on any missions. Instead we will be training. I want you each to decide on something you want to work on. I'll go and help each of you as best I can." In the dirt, Ayan took a seat, bringing out a tiny sealing scroll and calling forth the mannequin. He began sketching while perched atop the wooden body. Baki kept a close eye on the boy as he fed it his chakra. Puppet clone jutsu was soon standing alone without the need for chakra strings. He was immediately confronted by another red-headed boy. Shira and Gaara both paused and gaped at the boys. Just as Ayan was about to cheer though, its face started dropping and it poofed back into the mannequin. It was no longer a clone, but it continued to move back and forth. Ayan punched it in the head and said, "Damn." As its legs reached 90 degrees, it stopped falling backwards. only to have the puppet get back up, then abruptly passing out. "What are you trying to do exactly?" Ayan asked, sitting in front of the puppet with his arms crossed in frustration. "I've been trying to create a seal that would let me run clones of myself," Baki said, looking up at his sensei in frustration at his inability to perform the foolish jutsu correctly. Baki had to acknowledge that was innovative and, to be honest, a really good idea. He would be practically unbeatable in one-on-one combat if he could make these clones into highly skilled fighters or swarm a space to provide a window of opportunity for his puppets to move in for the kill. As he drew out another symbol on a piece of paper, Ayan thought, it moved without chakra strings. "Yeah, when I put my chakra into it, it gets a consciousness kind of." Ayan nodded. Baki watched as another puppet came to life, transforming into Ayan again, only this time his hair was neon green and it was about 60 years older before appearing as wood again and falling to the ground. In frustration, Ayan tangled his hair and said, "Why won't this work?" "You aren't putting enough chakra into it," Baki said while getting Ayan to shake his head. "No, I'm putting plenty into them. I can't get my chakra to stay though. It's like the seal can't bind temporary chakra to an object." Gaara observed their back and forth exchanges. Ayan was practicing jutsu on his own. It was amazing to observe. He would be stronger than himself if he continued in this manner. He had made a seal that appeared to be quite elaborate. Although Gaara didn't know much about seals, he had heard that they were challenging. Additionally, this seal was experimental. Not like anyone has done anything that's similar. "You'll get it, Uzumaki-kun. I've never seen anyone your age have such an understanding about sealing." Ayan looked up at his sensei, surprised to receive such a genuine compliment. "It's impressive." Baki wasn't lying either, he had an amazing natural sense of sealing. "I'm sure you'll discover it somehow." Baki turned to Shira and asked, "Would you be able to help me with Shira-kun? How many of these mannequins do you have?" Ayan couldn't help but smile. "There are 60 in my scroll. Why? You want my help?" "I mean yes," he exclaimed, leaping to his feet and bringing the other mannequins into view. The taijutsu practitioner looked at Ayan with a hint of fear as Baki called Shira over and said, "Shira-kun. Ayan-kun is going to use these mannequins to fight you. Don't worry, they don't have weapons. I can't fully mimic fluid taijutsu movements, but speed and numbers I can for sure do." Ayan laughed at Shira's assurance. "Okay, Ayan-kun, I can do this." 10 of the mannequins were picked up by chakra strings that shot out of his hands. As Shira was surrounded by 10 humanoid puppets, he dropped into a fighting pose. Baki soon saw Shira start to dodge and block ever faster attacks. He twisted and flipped around counterattacks, kicking and punching the puppets. Shira's speed increased with each counter he used. One of his kicks eventually struck with enough force to break a puppet. Ayan was momentarily taken by surprise. The last attack had been different in some way. Quickly reaching out and getting a backup mannequin puppet, he threw it into the spar. Baki and his other 2 genin watched more intently. Shira inhaled deeply, and his movements ceased almost entirely. His body was a blur as he twisted so quickly, nearly vanishing. His eyes, which were normally brown, turned white. 3 of the mannequins were totally destroyed in a matter of seconds. Ayan drew his puppets away. The amount of chakra emanating from the older boy was palpable even to him. Baki shouted, "That's enough," which caused both boys to halt. "That breathing technique you do, it's much more powerful than you think." Shira resisted, feeling his body strain. "What do you mean, sensei?" he asked. Ayan's puppets, even his weaker mannequins that he has been trying to make as clones, are different from most puppets, Baki said, gesturing to the mannequins. Ayan-kun has more chakra than almost anyone in the village due to his lineage. He naturally puts chakra into the puppets he uses, which makes them stronger and faster than others. They are truly an extension of his body. Shira and Gaara both gazed at the destroyed puppets that were scattered on the floor when Baki said this. "This technique increased your body tenfold. You are already physically stronger than pretty much anyone in the village. That includes me, as is your speed. If you could take that feeling you just had and shrunk down, your basic speed and strength would be at a whole different level. On the other hand, if you increased it to higher levels, you'd be able to take on both Ayan and Gaara in fights," Ayan exclaimed cheerfully, drawing a look from his sensei. "Sorry." Ayan ducked his head and began tidying the mess between them. Shira attempted to comprehend what he had just heard. He benefited greatly from his simple breathing method that he developed because it helped him feel better. His chest was filled with excitement and delight as the implications of what he was being told began to sink in. I am curious about what else you could do with your taijutsu. He simply didn't know how to handle this or what to call it yet. Shira shifted uneasily and said, well, I do have an idea. Baki crossed his arms thoughtfully. I read that a clan in the Leaf Village is able to hit your chakra points with chakra somehow. Well, I think I can do that with pressure points. Shira was correct. He was no stranger to the Hyuga. The clan played a significant role in the Leaf military for a reason. They could hit your chakra points with their Byakugan, knocking you out of a battle or possibly killing you. It was as bad as fighting a Uchiha to fight them. In close quarters, they were almost impossible to kill one-on-one. Though their dujutsu helps with that. How could you accomplish this? With a grin on his face, because I know so much about the human body now. My best friend is a medical ninjutsu specialist. She taught me about pressure points and where to hit them. Even without me feeding chakra into them, it slows you down a lot. After giving it some more thought, Baki nodded in agreement and said, then we will focus on this as well. It would be a safe bet to start in basic training. She turned to face Ayan and said, continue on your seal training for now. I'm going to focus on Shira-kun for now. Hi Baki-sensei. Bowing, Ayan returned to his task of experimenting with various seals to make his clones function. However, Gaara once more observed the other two boys. He seemed to be doing this more frequently these days. Shira had changed a lot lately. During spars, Gaara sensed his speed. On several occasions, he managed to overcome his defenses. Even though you never made him bleed, you still hit him. He was improving at an astonishing rate. In the meantime, he still didn't understand Ayan. His stomach churned at the red head. He had strength and skill. He was a difficult opponent to defeat even without his puppets. He had already witnessed him use his kenjutsu against Baki and Shira several times. He was quick and talented, constantly adjusting to new circumstances when necessary. He even observed him using sealing scrolls to set traps. Then he became a real threat thanks to his puppets. Ayan was Gaara's only real rival in the village. Ayan turned to his teammates at the conclusion of the training and said, so now that we're done, you guys want to come over to my house? I know we have. Gaara simply turned around and left. Ayan was rendered mute. After watching the other boy leave, Shira said to himself, I'll gladly come over Ayan. Really? Awesome. Let's go. Shira exclaimed as he saw Ayan's eyes light up. He grabbed the older boy's arm and made Ayan follow him home. The boy wasn't nearly as frightening as he said, Shira discovered, especially after spending so much time together. Ayan was strong and talented, and he would stop at nothing to keep Shira and Gaara safe. Ayan had not anticipated seeing his mom's genin team in their tiny training area when he arrived at his tiny house. Hey mom. Ameno got up from where she had been lying in the grass and tackled her friend Shira as they appeared to have just finished their training exercise. Kankuro and Tamari, who had been leaning on her fan, both glanced at the little redhead. Hey sweetie, no missions today? She asked, shaking his head as he placed his sealing scrolls on the weapons table. Nope, we trained, but I couldn't get my clones to work. She looked at her son's seal that he had laid out for her and tried to figure out why it wasn't working. The blonde Kanauchi looks at Ayan. Well, while Sensei looks over that, she says, I am Tamari. You must be our baby brother's teammate Ayan-kun. She said, bowing slightly. I'm Ayan Uzumaki. Hopefully Gaara-chan hasn't said anything bad. He blushed when he realized how he addressed Gaara. Sorry, Gaara-kun is just misunderstood and it's in a cute puppy kind of way. Kankuro grinned and cocked his head. Stopped. Shira gazed in disbelief at the puppeteer. Later, he would need to inquire about that. The older puppet user spoke up though, well, I'm Kankuro. I hear you're an even better puppet user than me. Tamari laughed, how are you the son of such an evil person? Ayan froze, rubbing the back of his head and trying not to blush this time. I don't know about that. I just have different puppets is all. You got our brother to think about his goals as a shinobi. You apparently think he is cute like a puppy and now you're trying to hide the fact that you're easily the second best puppet user in the village. Well, Mayuma, Kyatsu laughed at her son's baffled face. He froze, unsure of what to say. But Ameno couldn't help but smile as she crossed her arms and said to her friend, he's adorable. I want one. Well, he's my teammate so no, you can't have him, Shira said, shaking his head at his friend. Ayan quickly moved to sit in front of his mother and said, so, I think I have an idea. Put some of your blood in the center of the seal. Using a kunai, he cut the middle of his hand. He went through his hand signals after applying some blood to the seal's center, saying, "Puppet clone jutsu." The mannequin was freestanding, and everyone froze. He looked exactly like him, with no chakra strings or anything. The smirk on the clone's face matched that of his real self. "I did it. I created my clone jutsu," Ayan said, turning to face Shreya. Kyatsu hardly had time to react before he leapt into her embrace. However, Kyatsu's attention remained on the puppet clone. It added something intriguing for her infant son while also providing her with ideas for him. It might be a while before he needs to use chakra strings. He might be able to use his puppets to fight him like a summons if he modified this seal for them. After he improves with these specific seals, she might bring it up. "Well, come on, it's time to rest, kiddo. No more training for the day." Kyatsu gave her boy a fierce look, and he immediately agreed, saying, "I won't promise." Temari and Konkuro were thinking about Ayan as they walked home. How he was really just a good boy. How gifted he was, too. In battle, neither of them could see themselves defeating him. Temari made the decision to speak up, saying, "Konkuro, I think Ayan being on Gaara's team was the right call." "You know, I think you're right." Temari could relate to Konkuro's skepticism about his own abilities as he gazed at the stars and considered the child he had just seen. "I also think I need to have a new goal. No way will I ever be able to compete with that kid." In no time, Ayan would likely surpass his father in strength, particularly if he acquired more expertise. Gaara entered his father's workspace. Before addressing the man, he looked around and allowed his murderous intent to slightly emanate, allowing the Anbu to get away. "What is it you want, Gaara?" asked Rasa, folding his fingers together. "I want Ayan-kun and Kyatsu-san to fix me." Rasa raised an inquisitive eyebrow, asking, "Why the sudden change?" Rasa grinned and said, "All right, I'll make the arrangements." Gaara crossed his arms and said, "I want to be stronger. I can't do that if I'm fighting my demon. We need to become better." Right now, Team Baki was close to the northern border. Their first A-rank mission was being sent to them. They were put to the test to see how well they could combat more experienced adversaries. Iwa was reportedly sending shinobi into the land of wind. Rasa could not permit this to happen. 2 teams were being sent because it had come to that. 3 shinobi made up the first team. Korikyo was one of the Jonin. He was an expert practitioner of wind jutsu. He was accompanied by 2 chunin, Ikiko, a skilled cloth binder, and Zamatu. He was an archer who moved his arrows in various ways using wind jutsu. At first, Korikyo was irritated. He was annoyed at the idea of embarking on a challenging mission with genin. That is, until they discovered that the genin with Baki was actually the son of the Cage. Gaara, the demon monster, Ayan Uzumaki, Sasori's son, accompanied that. They had been told that this genin team was far superior to the others. Rasa hadn't promoted them yet, which was the only thing that made them genin rather than chunin. Gaara shrugged, but his eyes brightened at Ayan's joyful smile as he said, "Hey Gaara. Why do you think Iwa is trying to scout us out?" Ayan asked his friend. Shira did respond to the query. "Well, my dad says that Iwa and Konoha had tried to get into the land of wind in the last war. It had been super close, and we lost a ton of ninja." Korikyo looked back over his shoulder at the genin and said, "That's why Rasa pushes our genin more than most villages. We need our shinobi to be as strong as possible." He's right. All 3 children turned to see Baki staring down at them. "We were forced back and never truly went on the offensive. We still haven't recovered either." Baki went on to say, "You are different as well. Ayan, you're the son of one of the strongest puppet users of all time. Not to mention you're a prodigy in the field. Gaara, you're the son of the Cage and Suna's weapon. While you, Shira, are an anomaly of our village and headed towards becoming the strongest taijutsu user in all of Sunakaga's history." Confused and irritated, Shira answered, "No pressure." However, Ayan simply put his arm around the larger boy's neck and said, "Come on. We'll be even better than anyone could imagine." Gaara merely observed the boy. He was really kind and upbeat. Gaara's gaze was fixed on Ayan. He desired constant proximity to him. Watch him battle and see his smile. He only saw Ayan as an equal in the village. His abilities were amazing, almost like a work of art. Looking at the genin team, Korikyo said, "We are getting close to the border. Let's split up. We will keep going north. Baki, you and your team should go east." The slightly younger man grinned, turned with his team, and charged off, saying, "Fine. Don't get yourself killed, Korikyo." After gathering his group, Baki set out to hopefully cut off the enemy shinobi. Ayan was scanning the area for any indications of the enemy shinobi. all the while mentally noting the precise location of Gaara and Shira. In an attempt to see what his sensei might notice, Ayan stopped close to a small village on the outskirts. It was odd that there were no civilians out and about. This village wasn't very big. Actually, Ayan was attempting to determine why any foreign force would target this village. As they entered the village, Baki only said, "Be ready." The air was heavy with the stench of death. Undoubtedly, something was happening. Shira was positioned slightly to the puppet user's left. Ayan sensed the movement of Gaara's chakra on his right. It seemed as though he was getting ready to destroy whatever target they were going to encounter. As they approached the center of the village rock, a dozen golems rose up from the earth and yelled, "Gaara! You go left, get any shinobi that could hit us. Shira with me. Ayan, destroy these golems." Ayan hurriedly called forth Kinja. Perched atop the snake, he observed that the shinobi considered him the greatest danger. As he watched Gaara walk alone down a narrow alleyway, a smile came to his face. No, they didn't have to be concerned about him. He raised his hand and started slicing through the golems. The snake was struck by rocks, but its armor was unbroken. Kinja reached out and snatched one of the golems before hurling two more at it. A tall, dangling man said, "I'm impressed. Didn't think puppets were that good," as he left. He had just entered his 20s. He was dressed in a kimono that looked very formal. "Think you're strong fighting a kid?" Ayan asked in a lethal tone, his light brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. A smirk on his lips nearly reflected the worry in Ayan's eyes as he said, "Oh, I know who you are. We were hoping to get you out here. You and that little Jinchuriki." "Wait, that means you're," he said, but before he could say anything more, kunai fell from the opposite building, descending into Kinja. He allowed it to envelop him, protecting him from the barrage of detonations. Byako and Futsumaiki are summoned. He leapt back up and glanced down at Kinja. Although it was still functional and effective overall, it was in poor condition because the plating had been damaged. Both directions were filled with explosions. He could tell Baki and Shira were fighting from one end. He realized that Gaara was fighting by herself in the other. He moved as soon as the three shinobi attacked, raising his hands. To his left, Futsumaiki launched himself at the ninja. The kunoichi are being struck by its bladed arm. Although she was quick, Ayan had already witnessed more skilled kenjutsu. However, Byako had already surpassed the ninja to his left. The man yelled as claws slashed out, slicing into his chest. He threw up a wall of mud and leapt back. But Byako made a quick breakthrough. Its sides launched long blades into position. However, Byako rushed past the shinobi before he could respond. The man was cut in half by the long weapon. Ayan kept the battle in balance. Kinja is also being used to maintain defense. Its enormous tail easily smacks the golems out of the way as it approaches. He turned Kinja's head and opened its mouth when he saw Futsumaiki moving the kanouchi. Poison rained down on the ninja in a cloud of green. Panicked, she let out a scream. The leader was frightened and shocked. A 12-year-old boy swiftly killed his teammates. He clenched his fist into a stone and seized the little puppet that resembled a gremlin. Byako then grabbed hold of his leg. The shinobi let out an agonized scream as it severed his leg with a flick of the wrist. "Why are you after us?" he asked, looking up at the red-headed boy's almost tearful face as he rode his puppet to him. When Ayan said, "I won't tell you anything, you Suna brat," her face contorted in scorn. "This man comes here to trap his team with his ninja. You can't even bear to fight him, yet you insult him and his house." He lifted Kinja and pushed its mouth down, causing it to bite and crush the man's upper body. Resealing his puppets, Ayan took to the rooftops and said, "I need to get to Gaara." He knew Gaara was nearby because he could hear the fighting. He saw two ninjas crushed by sand as he leapt to the edge of the tallest building. However, a few were still in operation. This trap was undoubtedly a battle of quantity over quality. He positioned Nanto and Hokuto beside himself and called forth 4 puppets. As he sent Shinigami to assist Gaara, an energy shield enveloped him. He saw that his friend was surrounded by 4 enormous stone walls. The ninja leapt onto the hill and began making hand gestures. Ayan made the hasty decision to end this. Shinigami appeared behind one of the shinobi who was removing his head, twirling its scythe. Before the other boy was lifted out of the trap, 2 of the ninjas were killed by sand that shot out like pullets. When another shinobi attempted to draw his sword, a huge blade pierced through him, instantly killing him. Ayan turned the puppet to the next ninja and grinned to himself. Movement is only visible out of the corner of the eye. He was startled to see a man wearing a full-body armored suit. It was leaking steam. He was moving so quickly that he was unable to pull out Kinja. The shield was nearly broken by the hit. However, it surprised Ayan by sending him and his puppets hurtling through the air. It took him a minute to catch his breath after hitting the ground with force. He barely avoided the foot that slammed into the ground, leaving a crater, as he rolled to the side. Ayan was aware of his broken ribs. He had to exercise caution because this man moved extremely quickly. Shinigami lay beside Gaara on the ground. He had Tenio, Byako, and Kinja in their scrolls. She was most likely his best option. He had the twin puppets hold their staves as he pulled them back to him, creating a barrier in time to stop his opponent's blow. They hurled hundreds of poisoned darts at the Shinobit, forcing them to advance, but he vanished before landing on top of Hokuto, instantly destroying it. The mantis blade of Nanto materialized. When he let his own chakra flow into his puppet, it moved more quickly than he had ever made it. The back of the ninja's suit emitted steam. The puppet's upper body was crushed by the force of his fist punch. The remnants collided with Ayan. "What is this guy?" he asked as he forced himself to stand up after falling back and feeling his body beginning to give up. "You did well for a child," he said, glancing at the formidable warrior in front of him who was wearing an odd cloak. "I apologize, but these are my orders," he said. As the shinobi flew in his direction, everything slowed down. He wished he had known this was a Jinchuriki earlier. Fear gripped Ayan as he realized he was going to die, but just as the man's fist was about to hit him, sand shot around him, briefly obscuring the ninja. When the sand cleared, he saw that the ninja was avoiding the sand tendrils and moving away from him. Avoid touching Ayan. His sand-dropped Shinigami next to Ayan filled the boy with relief, but Gaara was nearly feral, and murder was gushing from him in waves. Pain shot up to his shoulder as Ayan lifted his right arm, knowing it was broken. With his other hand, he watched as Gaara's sand slowly encircled him, his body hardening into a strange mixture of boy and monster. Han didn't want to give Gaara any more time, so he moved at a breakneck pace, but Shinigami interrupted him before the enemy Jinchuriki could get to Gaara. Ayan, who knew he couldn't win this battle, was pumping as much of his own chakra into the puppet to make it more durable while Shinigami moved swiftly, blocking and attacking almost as fast as Han. Gaara, who now had a huge sand claw on his left hand, waved a tanuki tail behind him as he finally attacked, and the clawed attack struck the shinobi, sending him crashing through a house. Ayan used Shinigami to take on most of the damage. It was getting battered, but it was working. Sadly, Han realized what was happening and focused his attack on Ayan. Han emerged from the debris with tremendous force, and Ayan summoned Kinja, forcing himself to ignore the pain in his arm so he could use it to move around the fighters. Gaara was quick, but not even close to Han. The next attack caught Ayan off guard, as Han's fist crashed into Kinja's side, sending him to the ground. He rolled up and attempted to pull Shinigami, but Han was already on top of him. The Jinchuriki grabbed his right arm and squeezed, sending Ayan flying back with a well-placed kick. The pain was worse than he had ever experienced, with the muscle tearing and the bone breaking. He lay on the ground and gazed up at the blue desert sky, feeling the heat on his face but not much else. He looked down and saw where his arm had been, and the blood pooling in the sand made him feel insulted that it was staring at him. He heard a tailed beast roar, and when he looked back up, he saw Gaara on the giant monster's head. "Huh, I mistook it for a raccoon. I suppose it's a tanuki." Wind and sand attacks erupted, but he was unable to observe their progress. "Ayan, you're going to be okay, I promise," Shira said, appearing in his vision alongside Baki. "What should we do, Baki-sensei?" Everything turned black before Ayan heard the response. The four-letter word reverberated through Gaara's body: kill 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 kill. He was furious that he had hurt Ayan, and he was holding out well, even transforming his chakra cloak into a two-tailed form to help him stay in the fight. However, Gaara and Shikaku were too weak for their environment, and their attacks were strong. Han must have realized he was going to lose because he tucked his tail and fled as the other team of sand shinobi emerged, firing ninjutsu at him while detonating explosive seals and pushing him back. Gaara and Shikaku yelled together as the enormous tail crashed into the man, shattering his armor. Shikaku turned around, still largely in control, and noticed that the shinobi were prepared to defend their downed genin from him. He gently released himself back to Gaara, wondering if the strange boy, who reminded him of his last human friend, was all right. Baki watched the sand crumble and shatter before the red-headed Jinchuriki appeared in front of them, his gaze fixed on his teammate. He could see the devastation caused by the fighting, a trap that leveled an entire village, and they were still unsure of the civilians' whereabouts. The boy didn't answer, so he knelt down and placed his hand on his shoulder. Gaara. The boy gave him a wet look, which he had never seen in the boy before. We did what we could for the time being, he said. I need you to return him to Suna using your sand. Baki sighed and turned to face Korikyo, but he didn't answer. He let his sand reach out and gently picked up the puppet user, and Shira tried not to cry as he watched Gaara pick up Ayan. How did you know to come back? We encountered a few shinobi. They knew that Gaara-kun and Ayan-kun were their targets. This doesn't feel right, the man said, pausing before shaking his head. Apparently they knew we would have sent your team. They couldn't have possibly known. Baki nodded. Korikyo was correct. There was never a way they should have known. Someone inside the cage office had set up this trap, possibly one of the Eldersa, but he couldn't believe it was the cage himself. Nothing made sense, and he would figure out why. As quickly as possible, they returned to the village and took Ayan to the hospital. Word reached the cage and Kyatsu. Baki and his team stood in the waiting room. Gaara had not spoken since the battle, and the only expression on his face was horror or fear of his friend dying. Shira remained largely unchanged, with Ayan playing a significant role in his significant improvement. When Lady Chiyo entered the room, Baki noticed that she was nearly on the hunt and rushed over to ask, what happened? What became of my grandchild? We were ambushed, Baki said, bowing his head slightly in resignation. I apologize, Chiyo-sama. We assumed it was just a typical shinobi team, so we fanned out against them. Iwa attacked us with one of its Jinchuriki. After a battle between Ayan and Gaara, Han eventually gained the upper hand. With her team right behind her, Kyatsu was present and heard the majority of the explanation. Ameno rushed past her and put her arms around Shira, and Kyatsu came up, holding herself together, but he could see the struggle in her eyes, asking, what is the damage? Several broken bones, concussion, and the missing of his right arm. Chiyo turned around and left, asking, where are you? Kyatsu's voice broke at the thought of her baby boy losing his arm. To help him remain a shinobi, I'm going to make him something. So stop talking, you've done enough. Baki felt the weight of his failure bearing down on him. He had never intended to become attached to these children, especially Ayan, but that was not his destiny. The boy was smart, kind, and strong, and Baki wouldn't let his genin down again. Kyatsu-san, I'm sorry. Bowing, he closed his eyes. I was not kind to your son when he first joined my team. Both then and on this mission, I let him down. I should have protected him. Kyatsu shook her head. He wouldn't think that. Ayan engaged in combat with a Jinchuriki. He never would have expected you to be there to protect him. But Gaara interrupted, Sensei, caused Ayan's injury. It wasn't your fault, Sensei, Baki said, his eyes welling with tears. He helped me and made himself a target. Baki was shocked and silent, not expecting Gaara to change so much in the few months they had spent together. Baki-san. They turned to see the cage enter, saying, I want Kyatsu and you to accompany me. The children will remain and let us know if anything changes. Rasa was followed back to the office by both Jonin. No one said anything until they were inside and the room was empty. It has come to my attention that we have a traitor in our midst, the Jonin said. I don't know where they came from or why, but the council and I were aware of that mission. So, what should we do? Baki asked. This couldn't happen again. They needed to prepare the kids for another betrayal before it happens. Rasa though let out a sigh. I do not know. I'm working on plans to find out how this occurred. But I have a favor to ask of you too. Gaara wants his seal fixed, he said, turning to face his village. His tailed beast probably doesn't mind either. Kyatsu was shocked but did not interrupt, saying, I would understand your reservations of helping me when I was unkind to your plight when coming to this village. Something has changed in him since he met your son. Rasa turned to face the smiling Uzumaki and said, I'll help. Gaara saved my baby. Now, I will stop at nothing to assist him. He will never realize how much I owe him. We'll get it done as quickly as we can. What are you going to need? Kyatsu nodded, saying, I'll need Ayan when he wakes up, and I need 3 of your sealing masters. Granny Chiyo was at her shop, reviewing every schematic she had created for her great-grandson. It was designed to be modified and customized so that he could add various tools and weapons. It resembled her own arm. Poor Ayan. To battle so early in his shinobi career against a formidable Jinchuriki. It appears that the idiot Inkoki believed he could kill two of Sunakage's upcoming weapons before they were prepared. She's retired, which is fortunate for him. She would murder that man. She raised the sections using her chakra string, going over each piece in detail. She pulled it around in the hopes that her Ayan would approve. Even though it's not a real arm, it eventually gives him more choices. A hand rested on her shoulder from her obnoxious brother, who was strangely silent beside her. He opened his arms after she turned around and gave him a fierce look. She had been crying, but Chio was unaware of it. She was unsure of how to handle the loss of her great-grandson. He would have perished if he had been weaker or less experienced. If Gaara hadn't been there. Don't worry, Kai, her brother said, pulling her into an embrace. He will be okay. Kyatsu stood gazing at her infant son. He was still unconscious as he lay in the hospital bed. Where his arm had been, his chest was wrapped around it. In the hopes that he would feel it, she took his left hand and squeezed. She steeled herself and wiped her eyes, preparing everything for when they fixed Gaara's seal. They needed to ensure that it was infallible. Everyone had learned from this mission that the other villages were targeting Ayan, Gaara, and that tailed beast. Whatever happened, they would be prepared. He was being prepared for an implant. His new arm would be held by it. It seems that Chio had a prosthetic of her own. It was only her lower arm, though, as opposed to what her boys will be. No, things would be different here. She remembered Ayan's training and clenched her fist. She ought to have applied more pressure to his chakra chains. If she had, then he could have defeated that shinobi. He would have been prepared. Kyatsu-san. Two nurses entered, their faces displaying concern because she had been leaking information about her intention to kill. It's time for Ayan-kun's operation. She put on a hopeful smile and pretended to be composed, saying, "Thank you. I'll wait out in the waiting room." She saw one of her genin with Ayan's teammate as she left the room. While her friend waited patiently for any information, Ameno attempted to console him. He said, "Kyatsu-sama. Is Ayan okay?" As his eyes brightened upon seeing Kyatsu. She was pleased that her son had at last made a true friend because she could see the hope in him. They are putting in the implant now. When his great-grandmother arrives, she will put on the new arm, said someone who wasn't scared of him because of his father. She would ensure that he wasn't merely a shinobi. So, he can stay a ninja. He would be the best shinobi the sand has ever encountered. Between her and Chio, he had developed into a real threat. Jinchuriki or not. What do we know? How did they attack us? Baki asked, practically kicking the door down the Cage's office. In contrast to the Jonin, Rasa was at peace. Baki could not help but grind his teeth as he said, "You know he is lying." He didn't even look up from his paperwork, saying, "We don't know." However, the Tsuchikage denies any involvement in the incident involving your team. Baki froze as Rasa looked up and said, "Of course. I know he tried to assassinate my son and Ayan Uzumaki. We cannot afford to go to war. At least not yet. Don't worry, Baki-san. You and your team handled the situation well. Not many genin could survive a fight against such odds." Rasa looked at his subordinate and saw the guilt. Sorry, Kage-sama. Not that Baki didn't agree. In fact, he thought that most Chunin teams would have been easily destroyed if they had been in that position. No, he had powerful genin. They had repeatedly demonstrated that. But he sensed the imminence of war deep within his chest, which implied that they would be stranded in the center of it. Rasa sat down as he faced his cage and asked, "Then what is your orders, sir? When Ayan wakes up and is ready, we will have him and his mother alter Gaara's seal. Go and get with Shira. Get him ready. I want your team to go to Konoha for the Chunin exams." He took out a flask and filled 2 glasses with water. Bowing, Baki departed, saying, "Hi Kage-sama. I will do so." He would assist Shira in refining his new methods. If the boy wanted to keep up with Gaara and Ayan, he would have to push him. The world began to gradually come into focus. Ayan could hardly recall what had transpired. As he attempted to massage his head, he became aware that his right arm was gone. Things hit him at that point. The battle replayed in his mind, filling in the blanks. Recalling that Jinchuriki had ripped his arm off, Ayan lost control of his breathing. He reached up and grasped the spot where his arm had been. He felt a metal implant beneath the coverings. His breathing became even more erratic, and tears began to flow from his eyes. All Ayan wanted was to recall Gaara's fate after he fell. Something was encircling Ayan. Then a voice called to him, slicing through flesh like a knife. The person's face slowly became visible. His world seemed to brighten once more when he saw his mother's smile. Moma. He leapt into her arms and allowed her to simply hold him. As he sobbed into Kyotsu's chest, the pain in his shoulder subsided. It's okay, Ayan. You're safe now. He noticed that Kyotsu's eyes were swollen and red. At one point, she had also been in tears. He nearly passed away. Gaara, is he okay? He asked, pulling himself together. Yes. He went into a frenzy when he saw you get defeated. Only he and the sand demon worked as one. Kyotsu smiled slightly. What? Ayan attempted to comprehend that. How does he know? Asked Gaara as he collaborated with his beast. You apparently made an impression. Either way, Gaara asked first to fix his seal, she said, leaning back in her chair and laughing. Ayan said cheerfully, good. His mother placed her hand on his cheek and said, your granny is working on something right now. We won't let this happen again. Also, we are going to be working on your chakra chains. Iwakager may not know it, but they aren't going to be prepared for a war with us. His smile vanished, but she then turned to face his shoulder and said, don't worry, baby. They targeted us, didn't they? Kyotsu asked, staring into her son's eyes as Ayan felt the blazing in his eyes. Then I'll be ready next time. I promise. He realized then that he was correct. From then on, their discussions shifted. His mother diverted his attention by telling him about the missions of her team. How adept they were at tactics on the battlefield. It seems that Temari was very good at wind jutsu. Like him, Kankuro was a very good puppeteer. Even though his mother acknowledged that he wasn't quite at his level, she still thought he would be a fantastic addition to the puppet brigade. Next was Ameno, Shira's best friend's best friend. It was the distraction that he needed. Ayan was unaware of how quickly the day had passed. After a few hours of talking with his mom, his team showed up. Shira was covered in dirt and sweat, presumably from training. His excited eyes were staring into his soul, it felt like. His sensei even looked relieved to see he was all right. However, Gaara was examining every inch of his body. His gaze swept over every square inch, every scrape, bruise, and wound, settling down on his shoulder at last. Ayan had never noticed the pain in his eyes before. He held up his arm, indicating an embrace, but he wasn't sure if he would accept. Before Shira crashed into the puppeteer, the other redhead was unsure of what to do. At last, Gaara seemed to get it. Gaara nervously put his arms around Shira as he moved away. Using just one arm, Ayan said, I'm sorry I lost Gaara. He awkwardly stood there, not knowing what to do, and said, it was not your fault. Gaara is right, Ayan. Gaara crossed his arms in exasperation and said, I think you two were hard-pressed to fight that guy. He was insanely powerful. He noticed that Shira had a guilty expression on his face for not being with his team. That is why next time we will be stronger. He will die next time. Ayan said, grinning, I won't let him beat me twice. Kyotsu and Baki watched as the boys carried on their conversation. As he described the new methods he was developing, Shira said, they will be a target no matter the nation. Yeah, I know, especially if Rasa-sama goes with his plan to assist Otokage. Kyotsu replied, neither of the Jonin desired this. Your youth would die if you summoned Kanakager's might. Despite having adversaries on all sides during the most recent Great Ninja War, Konoha remained unmoved. They did suffer losses, but not to the same degree as the other villages. Kyotsu remained silent and said, hopefully they will be ready. Rather, she listened as Ayan shared with them some new puppet designs he was considering, simply taking pleasure in the fact that her son was here and alive. When Ayan woke up the next day, he was free to move around the hospital. Compared to when he had first woken up, he was managing it considerably better. Even though the phantom pain persisted, he managed to manage it. Shira gave him his design book so he could start creating his next puppet designs. He would have to examine the puppets he lost in the previous battle first. Shinigami was severely damaged despite being operational. Kinja was, too. Even so, they were both still in better physical condition than the twins. Both Hokuto and Nanto were completely destroyed. The rest of his people were all right. Both Byako and Tenyo were prepared for battle. Although Futsumaki was also good, he wanted to equip the back of its knees with ninja wire launchers. Ayan wanted to finish 2 designs. Genbu came first. The tortoise was going to be black. To prevent most damage, the shell would be covered in layers of plating. It would have a strong jaw like Byako or Kinja, capable of crushing nearly anything. There would be a launcher inside its mouth that would let him shoot pressurized water, fire, or darts. His defense would be strengthened by this puppet, particularly if he expanded the quantity of puppets he could use simultaneously. Suzaku would come in second. This bird would be large enough to mount. Aien's wind was released. He is confident that he would be able to fly with this bird since he knows how to infuse his own chakra into his puppets. He would have a significant edge in combat thanks to it. Oh my Aien! He looked up from his notebook to see his great granny grinning at him while holding a package. Granny Chio! He exclaimed, leaping to his feet and almost tackling her. I hope you are ready to have your arm back. You already have it done. Aien asked, his eyes widening in disbelief. With a smug expression, Chio pulled out the arm and placed it in front of him, saying, of course. Who do you think I am? Some second-rate puppeteers. It had a slight tan. It's beautiful. The chakra-infused wood felt smooth to the touch and was more durable than most steels. I thought you'd like it, she said as she took out a brief scroll. This has everything you need to know in it. Your sensei said he wants you to start working harder on your taijutsu and kejutsu. So, it's more durable than my own. I also left most of the customization for you. My arm has a built-in shield. I left spots for you to add a mantis blade or other gadgets that you prefer. She gave the boy a warm smile and said, it's amazing. It looks like you made it, so it taps into my chakra network. Of course, if you are going to perform jutsu or infuse weapons with chakra, then we have to make sure it can keep up. He was always the master of his trade. Can we install it? Aien asked with confidence. Yes, however, it will be extremely painful at first. Chio's smile turned to a smirk. But the boy remained motionless. She took the arm, pressed it against his shoulder, and pressed hard. He let out a cry of pain as it made contact with his nervous system. His entire body ached. Even though he was crying, he didn't retreat. Not until she was at last done. He flexed his now wooden hand while staring at it. There was a connection even if it didn't feel. He threw a couple of punches to make sure it felt good while grinning. He felt his confidence returning as he looked at his grandmother and said, well, we better truly test it. As the two puppet users engaged in combat in the courtyard, every member of the staff who was available looked on in horror. While his grandmother called forth one of her 10 puppets, Aien called forth Byako. Byako rushed forward and collided with the puppet. When the puppet ducked and twisted around Chio's hand, Aien was careful to use only his right. The two puppeteers collapsed into the grass after hours of fighting. With a broad smile, Aien said, I need to get better. I have an idea, but I don't know how it will work, Granny. Oh, and what might that be? Aien asked as she got to her feet and glanced at his arm. I want to add a compartment in my forearm. Strings will connect to all my puppets at one time. She asked, stunned, are you sure? How will you control them all? He took out his notebook and placed it in front of her while grinning. There was a seal on the page he was displaying. One she wasn't familiar with. This is my connection seal. I was trying to find a way to allow me to control the puppets without strings. I haven't figured it out yet. But, he exclaimed with excitement, with this arm I should be able to connect my chakra enough to them that they can become extra limbs. You want to make them an extension of your body. Aien's grin widened. Yeah, I'd be able to see and hear from them. Imagine what I could do if I had full control. This wasn't a minor step forward, she was. Their entire understanding of puppetry would be altered by this. His puppets would behave in a manner akin to a summons. He'd be the most well-rounded shinobi in Suna if Baki and Shira could improve his close-quarters fighting skills. They never mentioned the new seal again. Aien wanted to work on a lot of things. However, preparing Gaara for his new seal was his primary goal. 3 more weeks passed before he recovered enough to execute such a difficult sealing. However, they were at last prepared. Kyatsu and Aien assembled shinobi inside a small temple near Suna. In a sealing circle, Gaara lay shirtless. As the two shinobi drew lines across Gaara's body, Rasa watched. Aien was sketching a line from Gaara's navel to the front of his neck. The pale boy's slender figure became apparent. Despite not having a lot of muscle, he was in excellent shape because he took care of his gourd everywhere. What's wrong? Inquired Gaara. And nothing. Just got lost in thought is all. Aien's face felt warm, but he knew he wasn't ill, so he simply got up and went to his position although he wasn't entirely sure. At the edge of the summon circle, Chio, Aien, and 3 other elders were gathered in a circle. Standing above the Jinchuriki, Kyatsu said, we are going to start by suppressing the Tunaki's chakra. This will cause a lot of discomfort because your body has become accustomed to the power. Gaara nodded, knowing that he was prepared for this. Then I'll alter your seal. This seal isn't like the ones used on the other Jinchuriki. This will give you the ability to take on his power in time. Though it will be a partnership, the beast will not be able to take over your mind as easily. Neither Gaara nor Shikaku had time to reconsider. The containment and suppression seal was activated, and all 5 of the nearby shinobi cut their hands. From every line around the boy, light blinked out. As Shikaku was pushed to the ground, Gaara's eyes grew heavy. Kyatsu started doing seals with his hands. Uzumaki sealing jutsu, seal of fate, she exclaimed as she placed her hand on Gaara's chest, causing the seal that had previously been there to shift and form in the middle of his chest in a swift and effective succession of 60 hand seals. They illuminated the entire space and connected to the other lines with ease. The boy lit up, and Aien's stomach fluttered once more. His seal is almost becoming a full-bodied tattoo. Gaara shouted as his thoughts returned to their own. The voices and fog that had troubled him for so long abruptly stopped. He slept for the first time in years, tears streaming from his eyes. Really dozed off. The sleeping Gaara was taken home by Baki. After meeting with Rasa at the Cage office, Ain, Kyatsu, and Chio said, I am thankful you aided my son. I have one more request I need though from you. As he pulled out a scroll, Kyatsu bowed and said, yes, Cage-sama. I am meeting with the Otokes to discuss plans to attack Konakaga. I have my Anbu guard, but I would like you to be there. Ain glanced at his mother and then back at the Cage. Through her shock, Kyatsu was able to reply, I will. But why? You have done much to earn my trust. You are also one of the most powerful ninjas in the village. Should it be a trap, I'd like you there. Kyatsu gave a nod. The worry was too much for Ain to ignore. Whatever happened, it was going to be interesting. He went to the training field after leaving to observe Shira and Baki working hard. He walked into the training area grinning before lowering himself into a combat position. No matter what, he would be prepared. He opens his arm and examines the new attachments. Ain first installed a chakra amplifier in the wrist, which could produce a chakra shield. He inserted a blade higher up in the forearm. The chakra metal blade would fall into position when the hand dropped. It was a minor detail that might provide him with an advantage in battle. Ain had made the decision not to include the thread mechanism, choosing a more realistic strategy that did not require him to rely entirely on his puppets instead. He discovered the hard way that his puppets would be able to provide all the answers. He couldn't make the same mistake twice. It had been too close, that battle. Thus, he had been training with his team for the past few weeks. It had been suggested that his team visit Konagawa. This year, they had requested a joint exam. It was strange because Suna would be doing their own anyway. The local event would be attended by Gaara's siblings, which Ain refused to accept. They ought to go there together since they were the 2 top teams. Ain went to his team's training area after gathering his equipment and puppets. As he got closer, he could see Shira and Gaara. Shira talked about how excited he was to show them his newest technique. He was so excited that Ain had to smile. However, Gaara turned to face him. His gaze had a reverent quality that made Ain shudder. Since they repaired his seal, the sand user had been that way. He had changed the way he had previously viewed Ain and his mother. Ain isn't even sure the boy knows how to show his gratitude. Hey guys, Ain said as she sat down beside Gaara. So how's training been lately? He asked, lightly brushing the Jinchuriki with his puppet arm. Great, I am finally getting my silent fist style down. Plus, I can activate up to level 3 of my 7 heavenly breathing method. Shira said with a gentle, radiant smile. That's amazing, Ain exclaimed, amazed at the other boy's growth. It was awesome how strong he was. Ain questioned whether such taijutsu experts existed elsewhere. Ain couldn't resist grinning at Gaara. I have been talking with the one-tail. He still isn't fond of me. Just talks about you all the time. Gaara said, blushing before turning away. What? Ain's heart began to race. What made the tailed beast enjoy discussing him? He froze for a second when Gaara said, it makes sense. You are amazing. Did he want to kill him? Before it really did make him malfunction. By now, he was certain that smoke was escaping his ears. Baki appeared before he could recuperate, saying, Genin. We have been tasked with a different mission than normal. The 3 Genin quickly became sober after their chat. As you know, we are to participate in the Chunin exams. However, things will be a little different. You must as a team make it to the finale. At least one of you. They all looked at him with disbelief. Baki paused as he took in his genin inside. We were initially going to be infiltrating to open up the leaf for attack. That is no longer the case. They were prepared and powerful, saying, instead we will be aiding the Kanakager. Shyly, Shira held up his hand and said, Sensei. Why the change in plans? I thought we were just going to hit and run. As the boy froze, both boys turned to face Gaara and said, last night there was an attempt on the Cage's life. Ayan could see that he was nearly unable to comprehend Baki's words despite his father's hatred. Rasa-sama is in critical care and is being treated by Chiyo-san for the toxin that he was subjected to. If Ayan's mother hadn't been there he would have fell to the snake. Confused, the puppet user questioned, won't he think we are going to help them though? He would believe that if he were Orochimaru. However, Baki understood the boy's perspective. The reasoning was sound. He had planned on both the hidden stone and hidden waterfall to aid in the invasion to destroy the leaf. All three nodded in agreement as they said, we will depart in 2 days. Make sure all of your equipment is ready. We will go directly to the Hokage's office when we get there. Baki grinned at his group. He was proud of his children as he looked over them. After the catastrophe of their previous mission, he hadn't anticipated that they would be so prepared for another one. When Ayan arrived home, his mother was seated. Mom. What happened? She said, wrapping her upper left arm and shoulder. He walked over and sat down beside her, saying, come sit, sweetie. The Cage is dying. It was a trap. Orochimaru tried to kill the Cage. Between the two of us we fended him off, but it was close. What happened to Rasa-sama? Ayan asked, her face contorted with frustration. He got sliced with Orochimaru's sword. There was a poison, and it is spreading fast. I wonder how Gaara feels. Ayan thought to himself, make sure you're ready. If the forces joining the fight against Konoha are big enough then us helping may not be enough. The genin spent the following 2 days getting ready for their journey to the Land of Fire. Ayan finished assembling his puppets, ensuring that they were prepared for use. He wanted to make sure they could adapt to the different climate because they were going to a forested area. He did a little more work on his arm as well. Dart guns are added to the fingertips. Shira said it was just eerie, but he thought it was cool. They soon found themselves heading in the direction of the village hidden in the leaves. The journey to the Land of Fire had taken an entire day. Ayan was simply astounded by the fertile country's splendor. He could sense Gaara's uneasiness. But he could see, the way he battles sand is his greatest strength. It must be confusing to be so far from the desert. When they finally reached Kanakager, a weak-looking Chunin stopped them. Ayan had little regard for them. The absence of guards piqued his curiosity more. Security was virtually non-existent. Were they truly so at ease that they would let so much through traffic without considering the consequences? Appeared to be suicidal. Looks like you're here for the Chunin exams. The individual examined them once more. There is a note to have the Sand Shinobi meet with the Hokage. Watch yourselves in the village. Walking through the village, Ayan saw it was similar to their own village. These civilians resembled those back home quite a bit. They were practically anticipating a disaster. He saw it as they continued on. The enormous tower in the village's middle. The Hokage would meet them there. Ayan found himself in front of the Hokage before he knew it. Welcome friends from Sunakager. I am sorry to hear about Rasa. Despite his elderly appearance, they could tell he was powerful based only on his aura. After bowing, Baki said, thank you Hokage-sama. We are glad to be here. These are much better circumstances than I thought we'd be in. Yes, so Orochimaru is after us yet again. Hiruzen couldn't help but breathe deeply. We will be ready. I am excited to have a Suna team here for our exams. I have heard much of this genin team. If the rumors are true they fended off a Jinchuriki. Ayan realized he had spoken out of turn and felt his heart rate increase. We lost to a Jinchuriki Hokage-sama. I like this one. What's your name? The Hokage asked with a smile. I am Ayan Uzumaki. The Hokage froze for a second before gathering himself. You said Uzumaki. What's your parents' names? Ayan asked his sensei, who merely nodded. An Anbu landed between them, and Hiruzen sighed, Kat-san. My mother is Kyatsu Uzumaki, and my father is Sasori of the Red Sand. I want you to go and get Naruto. Bring him here at once. Hokage-sama, Baki asked, lighting his pipe before glancing down at the puppet user. It appears that a bright future between our villages is destined for Baki-san, he said, looking at the Hokage with the same bewilderment as his genin. Gigi, why are you calling for me? I was training you know. exclaimed a boisterous blonde wearing an orange jumpsuit as the door finally exploded open after everyone had patiently waited. The boy turned to them with interest and said, Naruto, I have some people to introduce you to. When he noticed their headbands, he asked, you're all ninja. Where from? Hiruzen grinned adoringly while rolling his eyes. They are a team here for the Chunin exams. They're Jonin-sensei Baki-san. Then you have Shira-chan, Gaara-san, and lastly Ayan Uzumaki. Ayan-chan. This is Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as he looked at the boy with the red hair. All of a sudden, it made sense. Now they were just looking at one another. Shira and Gaara were taken to their hotel by Baki, letting the two Uzumaki get to know one another. Ayan sensed that someone was nearby, but since he was standing with a real clansman, he didn't give them much thought. Kakashi trailed Naruto closely. His normally boisterous genin is strangely silent. He questioned whether they had spoken yet. For the Jinchuriki, this couldn't be simple. Naruto had no family when he was growing up. The idea of having a clansman in the village all of a sudden must not have changed everything. Ayan accompanied Naruto to the Sarutobi Bridge. The blonde leapt onto the railing and took a seat. The way his feet hung there was visible to Ayan. It was unusual to see the boy looking lost. When he first came to the Hokage's office, he was really noisy. Ayan leaned against the railing and crossed his arms as he moved in beside him. He couldn't do it completely because he was rather short. So your last name is Uzumaki? Naruto asked, causing the redhead to grin. Yeah, wasn't always. My dad had given me a last name but heya. He's gone, Ayan grumbled. What about you? My mom said the clan was wiped out. Yeah, I'm an orphan. I don't know who my parents were. They died when I was born, Naruto said, his face hardening for a moment before breaking into a bright smile. So, you've been alone this whole time? Ayan asked, his heart aching. In his mind, he sees the face of Gaara and says, my friend with me. The one with the gourd. He has siblings but the village hates him. He is different, but underneath he is brave. I think he actually cares a lot about others. Even when he acts like he doesn't, Ayan said, sensing the blonde's shock. Ayan blushed and said, he sounds pretty great. He is. So, I take it you don't know our family jutsu then? Naruto yelled, to which Ayan grinned. Family jutsu, we have those. Ayan turned to face the masked ninja observing them and said, take that as a no. Maybe when you become a Chunin you can convince your sensei to come visit us. I'm sure mom will love teaching a fellow clansman about our heritage. Then Naruto saw Kakashi and said, I better take you to the hotel. He held out his hand to Ayan, who took it and said, I hope you're ready to lose cousin. The two boys laughed and departed. Later, Ayan was consumed by thoughts of Naruto and the other boy's peculiar chakra. It resembled Gaara's so much. His mind began racing as soon as he entered his room. Shira and Gaara were both sitting up, anticipating his arrival. When Gaara saw Ayan's face, he got to his feet. His eyes glowed with worry. He's a Jinchuriki. My cousin. Naruto is a Jinchuriki. Looking at Gaara, Shira questioned, are you sure? Naruto is so nice, and I don't mean to offend you, Gaara, but other Jinchuriki are so mean. Both boys turned to face Ayan as Gaara crossed his arms and sighed, he is so alone here. I wish he would simply accompany us home. For the remainder of the evening, Ayan remained silent and simply enjoyed the closeness of his team, reflecting on how they began and how they have now made him happy. They were strong, and he loved being a part of this team. Despite their significant loss, Ayan wouldn't ask for anything different. Before they realized it, Ayan and his group were on their way to the exam site when they encountered two Chunins. Look at what we got here, they said. 3 tiny shinobi in the sand. You ought to turn around, you know. Seems pretty weak to me, the second one laughed. Gaara, bored, let some sand spill out and encircle them. Please you two know this isn't the right floor, Ayan said with a cheerful smile, plus you'll make my friend mad. I apologize, simply go. Shira giggled as the sand fell back into the gourd. Ayan bumped his shoulder against Gaara, don't look so bored. You appeared to be quite bored. Ayan's eyebrow raised, oh. Gaara simply looked up with a slight smile and said, I don't enjoy threatening like I used to. As Ayan's face started to match his hair, Shira rolled his eyes at his friends and said, I like being around you though. As they entered, they noticed that several teams were already waiting for them, so they moved to the middle of them and sat down to watch everyone. They listened to the noisy rookies until they reached a strange boy named Kabuto. Ayan watched as various rookie genin entered, until at last he saw his cousin, whose blue eyes and bright smile gave the impression that he didn't see the contempt in the other Konoha genin. He had long white hair, glasses, and a strange talent he called data cards. He listed various details about the teams here, even threatening the new Sound Village. When Naruto finally asked him about himself, he replied, Ayan Uzumaki. Ayan stopped Gaara in his tracks by raising his hand and saying, he's a puppet user. What a record. There were 12 missions with AC ranking, 8 with AB ranking, 4 with an A ranking, and an impressive S ranking. He seems to be a very promising puppet user. Sasori the Red Sand's son. He and the genin Gaara fought and survived a Jinchuriki of Iwa. How's that? Before anyone could say anything more, the genin made a sound, and although Kabuto was quick to react, the attack still managed to land. Before they could consider the move, an imposing man entered. Naruto's eyes suddenly met his, and there was a moment of shock and mild fear. Fighting is not permitted here. The sound ninja simply shrugged and said, I'm sorry, San. Anxious vibes. Ayan sat down, and an older ninja sat next to him, practically glaring at the puppet boy. Now everyone takes your seats. He didn't let it get to him though. Instead listening to the rules. They had a written test. 9 questions initially with 1 question that is held off for the end. Checking over the questions, Ayan saw how hard these questions actually were. Smiling to himself, he pulled out a small insect-like puppet. It activated a seal that had been placed on the puppet's back by making a hand sign. He let the puppet crawl around the room and discovered a few people who were truly responding to the question. He smiled as he started recording the responses he was seeing. He waited until Baki, the man who announced the test's conclusion, said, now for your final question, you have 1 chance. Everyone waited for him to ask the last question. You will be eliminated from this test if you fail to answer this question as well. The exam will never be available to you again. This is your only opportunity to change your mind. Additionally, your entire team will be disqualified if you do. Ayan felt his chest tighten for his newly acquainted cousin as he watched dozens of teams drop out of the exam and ninja after ninja jumped out of the race. Before long, no one was standing up until Naruto did. Come on, nobody else is dropping out. Believe it or not, we are prepared for the upcoming test. Everyone was suddenly energized. Ayan's fear was replaced by pride until the window shattered open and a girl wearing a trench coat, purple hair, and extremely revealing clothes said, hello, I'm Anko Mitarashi, and I'm your next proctor. Her face crumpled as she looked around. Baki. This year, you let a lot of people go. Or this year's crop is just better than usual. Baki sighed in frustration. You're getting soft. We'll check on that. Everyone followed her down to a giant gate. Turning around, she started telling them the start of the next test. You'll be given scrolls. It's your responsibility to live and obtain the reverse scroll. She cut Naruto's cheek with a kunai after pausing briefly. Then, she appeared behind him and licked up the bloodline, saying, what am I not fun enough for you? Naruto was shivering in his skin. Only not because of her. A strange girl from grass was holding the kunai. You dropped this. Shira. Gaara. Did any of you sense her? Gaara shook his head, not removing his gaze from her. Shira stepped back behind them. What is she? Ayan's chakra was at an entirely new level of power, so she was unable to respond. At this point, don't die, get in there. Everyone dashed into the forest of death, and Ayan scouted the area for anything that might pose a threat to his group. The 3 boys paused at a very large tree and considered their options. Shira said, I think we need to push through this as fast as possible. Ayan had to agree that the less time they wasted, the better, even though they had the firepower to do so with ease. After calling forth Byaku and Futsumaiki, Ayan started looking for their scroll, which they eventually located a group from the hidden waterfall. As they moved, they each assumed a different genin. Byaku landed on top of another one, its sharp teeth biting into the boy's shoulder. Filled with a toxin, Ayan released him after putting just enough to render him inoperable. The last one was caught in Gaara's sand. Shira landed taking on the first boy, his punches hitting so fast the boy couldn't block or counter. He knocked him out with a quick kick. Have joy. If I was still who I used to be, you would be dead. He took the scroll from them, dropped the boy, and turned away. The boy tried to kill Gaara by throwing a tanto. Gaara grinned without turning to face his friend, but Shikamaru knew that Konoha's Team 10 was helpless against these shinobi. Ayan was quicker, though, and as he appeared between them, his arm blade shot out, deflecting the enemy ninja. As it retracted, he delivered a powerful punch to his face, sending him crashing into a tree and knocking him out cold. When they reached the tower the following day, Ayan sighed with relief. They had only a few skirmishes after obtaining their scroll, and Baki appeared when they walked in, activating the scrolls. "Good job, team," he grinned. "We are now patiently awaiting the arrival of everyone else." When Ayan awoke from his nap, he looked up and saw Gaara staring down at him. The other boy's eyes revealed something he had never seen before, and he felt his heart rate increase. "Sorry, Gaara, I didn't intend to doze off on you." Not far away, Shira burst out laughing, saying, "Yeah, didn't mean to at all, huh Ayan?" Feeling his face warm up, Ayan glared at the taijutsu user. "Shut up, Shira." After they had been here for a day and a half, Ayan said, "I think we got done too early. I feel like we have been here forever and I'm bored. In addition, I have a new seal idea." "I concur. They didn't like being stationary for too long, which is why they made such a great team." Gaara had been getting used to not going into a killer rage. Shira trained from sunrise to sunset, and Ayan spent the majority of his time with puppets or training. "This is boring," Gaara said in his usual monotone voice, and Baki smirked as he looked at his team. His genin were used to having difficult missions, and this type of long-term mission was going to be difficult for the three of them. Before Team 7 from Kanakagar showed up, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Ayan felt his chest tighten. They had been through the ringer. Naruto's eyes met his, and the blonde grinned, "Hey, I'll be back." "Who gives a damn?" There was a melancholy under Naruto's smile, and when Ayan stood in front of him, he said nothing. "You're nothing to write home about, Naruto." Ayan stood up and examined him, saying, "I know we just met, but what happened, Naruto-kun?" Naruto gazed into his eyes before turning to face his team, with Shira and Gaara observing. He was unsure of the boy's search, but he must have found it. "We got attacked by some weird snake person." Naruto was shaking. They were different, and something was put onto Sasuke-tem. "Are you all right?" Naruto nodded. "Yeah." Pausing, he looked down at his feet. "I'll see you in there." Ayan watched his kin walk off. Naruto seemed like a good person. He didn't deserve the way his village treated him. It was just like Gaara. If only they could take him with them. That way he and his mom could keep him safe. Maybe even train him in how to use his tailed beast too. Everyone was gathered into the main hall of the tower. It looked to be some kind of arena. The Hokage stood in front of them with his council. "You have all performed admirably. Many of you, though, made it through the second trial. Thus, a preliminary tournament will be held. Your proctor will be Hayate Gecko." "Listen up," said Hayate, coughing lightly as he walked forward. "One elimination is involved. Although killing is permitted, we will intervene if we believe it can be prevented. You'll stop right away if I call the match. Have any inquiries?" Ayan could tell that Kabuto was lying when he backed out, claiming to be out of chakra. Hayate went on, "Good, now everyone but Sasuke Uchiha and Yoroi Akato please leave the arena." Everyone watched as the boy battled the much bigger man, but as soon as the fight began, Ayan noticed something was wrong. Sasuke was unable to use his chakra, which was intriguing, but he couldn't figure out what else the boy was attempting to do. As the round went on, a strange mark appeared on Sasuke's neck for a short time, and Ayan realized that a strange seal had been applied to him. Amazingly, Sasuke was able to gain the upper hand without using any chakra at all. As he dropped, he kicked up, sending the man flying into the air, saying, "Sasuke Barrage." The attack's force knocked Yoroi to the ground, where it cracked under the strain. The Uchiha was going to be someone to keep an eye on, especially after the way he and the pink girl treated his new cousin. Shira whistled. That was an awesome move. There was no denying that the attack was strong, even without chakra. Sasuke Uchiha won. While everyone applauded, Ayan noticed Naruto's expression and thought, Zaku Abumi vs Shino Aburame. Shino glanced at the other boy and said, "You won't be able to recover if you fight me." The two shinobi obeyed orders that appeared in the arena. "Give up and pull out." The battle was short-lived, as Zaku charged at Shino and threw a punch that was easily blocked. Using various sound wave explosions, it appeared that the Konoha bug boy would lose until he turned to face the sound ninja. In a matter of seconds, Zaku's arm exploded as he attempted to fire another shot, and Ayan held his breath in shock. "What was that?" "The Aburame clan," Ayan inquired, glancing up at his sensei. "A strong clan. To find and eliminate their adversaries, they employ insects. Keep in mind that they steal chakra if you ever engage in combat with one. Employ shrewd strategies and quick takedowns. When his match was up, Ayan grinned and said, "Good luck." He said with smile. Gaara reached out and grabbed his hand, making Ayan quite breathing. "Good luck, Ayan." His face was hot as he said, "Oh, come on Gaara. You know this guy won't be anything." Ayan leapt down and looked at the man as he left. Mizumi had a confident expression on his face. Ayan waited for the match to start, smirking, and when it did, he drew his tanto and emerged behind him. Mizumi dodged just as quickly, though, and they started exchanging blows after he drew a kunai. However, Ayan was faster. He kept up and enjoyed himself while moving between each blow. Training with Baki-sensei and Shira had greatly enhanced his skill. He was stronger and faster, no longer a helpless fighter without his puppets. He was about to hit the man in the heart when a flash went off, momentarily blinding him. When his vision returned, he felt something encircle him, beginning on his right arm and moving around his neck and chest. "Ayan-kun," he heard the voice of Naruto. "Give up, brat, I should be asking you that," Ayan said, laughing, "but it's over." Even behind his mask and sunglasses, Ayan could see the confusion. The blade in his arm suddenly swung out, slicing into the man's flesh. Ayan grinned and raised his hand, sending Mizumi's arm back to him as he screamed in agony. "So you surrender yet?" Futsumaiki said, dropping a scroll. "Water release." "Water, I guess not." Ayan flicked his wrist, causing the puppet to move. Before Mizumi could complete his jutsu, the puppet slashed his neck, causing blood to spill from his mouth and neck. Ayan turned away and called back his puppet, causing it to crawl up on his shoulder and say, "Winner Ayan Uzumaki." He was quick and very skilled with that tanto, but that puppet was different. Ayan had been very skilled at fighting, but when he pulled that puppet out, Naruto hadn't even witnessed the last attack. Naruto was shocked by his new cousin, who was terrifying. Kakashi noticed that Naruto was staring at the red-headed boy. Naruto hadn't done much to help his sensei's son, but he had repeatedly let him down, and their team was barely surviving. Sakura and Sasuke detested him, and Kakashi was now considering whether it would be better for him to train one of the boys alone. He is an expert in Suna puppets. Getting his students' attention, Kakashi says, "A good one from what I hear. Suna, though one of the 5 great nations, is quite weak in comparison. Thus, they concentrate on getting rid of the numerical advantages. Have you heard about him? He and his team are among the best teams in Suna," Naruto inquired, perplexed. "You've probably heard a little about them. But even we Jonin watch them. Together, they pose a threat. Everybody is at least as good as Chunin." "That was fantastic," Shira said with a smile to Ayan. "You've accelerated significantly. Your speed with your puppets has probably increased as a result of the additional physical training." "Yes, it's truly insane." Gaara froze at Ayan's smile. "You have no idea how quickly my Shinigami has changed." Baki simply rolled his eyes at his genin, saying, "I bet it's blinding fast." When the girl from Naruto's team was called up, he was curious to see if she was strong or skilled. Based on the way she handled him, he thought she might be a good ninja, but that was untrue. How dare she treat Naruto like a monster when he was just a boy who wanted to protect his village? Sakura was a horrible kunoichi, and Ayan would love to watch her battle his mother's genin Tamari. She would completely destroy this excuse of a kunoichi. He felt a hand suddenly on his shoulder and turned to see Gaara staring at him. The boy's face was unreadable, but he could see that his chakra chains were out. "Sorry, Gaara," he said, simply lost in contemplation. Shira was called after the match ended in a draw. He jumped down and bowed to the girl who was standing confidently across from him, saying, "Let's have a good battle." However, Tenten simply laughed and said, "Yeah, whatever." Shira assumed a fighting stance and vanished as soon as the match was called. Tenten leapt away as his foot struck the ground where she had been standing, creating a crater. Shira threw kunai, deflecting each blow before delivering a strong blow that sent the girl hurtling backward. "Sensei." Guy froze as Lee shouted, "He's quick, Guy-sensei." "Shira is not skilled in either genjutsu or ninjutsu," Baki grinned. "He is only good at taijutsu." Lee looked down at the boy who was exactly like him. Shira easily avoided the blows aimed at him. Tenten, however, used the space created by her attack to draw out 2 enormous scrolls, double rising dragon. The Konoha hurled dozens of weapons at Shira with amazing speed. Shira gazed around at the carnage with sieged eyes. "That was incredible," she said, avoiding and deflecting most of the weapons with his advanced speed, though Ayan could see the cuts forming on the boys' bodies. However, You should concentrate on close quarters combat when someone has increased strength and speed. Or ninjutsu and genjutsu. What, you think we're done? She asked, causing the slightly older boy to freeze. Tenten pulled on wire and threw the weapons back at Shira. Ayan could see that he was having trouble and that, despite his strength and speed, he was no longer able to close the distance. Tenten had him. But he was taken aback when Gaara said, "Sensei, I think it's time he shows his new technique." Baki stepped forward. "Shira," he called, "enough wasting time." "Hi Sensei," he stated before dropping into a different stance, 7th Heavenly Breath Level 1. Ayan hadn't seen Shira's Heaven Breathe technique. A yellow aura formed around his body as his eyes went. The ground around him started cracking from the power. To say Ayan was shocked and impressed was an understatement. Might Guy have looked at the Sunajonin, this technique is similar to a forbidden jutsu from the leaf. Baki shook his head, this is a technique Shira invented on his own. He is a boy who embodies all of Suna's taijutsu skills. Tenten was unable to respond as the boy got past her defenses and started viciously beating her, each blow feeling like flying stones as she felt her bones crack beneath the blow. She fell to her knees and watched as Shira's foot stopped directly in front of her face, saying, "You have lost Kaneki." Her voice was breathy and difficult to hear as she said, "I forfeit." "You are a strong Kanouchi." The final words she heard before fainting were, "I look forward to seeing you improve." Shira was taken aback when Ayan started fussing over him as he returned to his team, saying, "You have so many cuts. I'll wrap them now." Shira remains motionless, damn it. Baki couldn't help but rub his forehead in frustration as Gaara watched their puppet boy go mom on the taijutsu user. As he watched his cousin Ayan, he came to the realization that no one had really trained him. Naruto seemed to have a peculiar talent for making solid clones, which he hadn't really seen without the use of a conduit or the addition of an elemental release, much like his puppet clones, which he hadn't really used much. He was quite unskilled outside of that, but he had more potential than most of the Konoha genin he had seen here, and his chakra reserves were insanely high even without the demon inside of him. Perhaps he would give him some advice, or perhaps a clan jutsu before he left, and if it works, he will know for sure that he is a true Uzumaki. They exchanged blows, and although Kiba displayed some impressive taijutsu moves, Naruto used some original strategies. However, he ended up winning in a disgusting way, letting out a fart that interfered with Kiba's acute sense of smell, and then using the opening to defeat the Doge boy. Ayan couldn't help but shake his head at the end. Their style was called Gentle Fist, and like the almost extinct Uchiha, they were trained to never engage in single combat with a Hyuga. The next fight was a vicious one between two members of the same clan, a boy named Neji and a girl named Neji. To most, the match appeared to be evenly matched, but Ayan could see that Shira did as well. It was brutal to watch as Neji methodically destroyed Hinata, and by the end of the match, Hinata was obviously defeated. Just as Neji was about to deliver the final blow, Proctor Hayate and 3 Jonin appeared to hold down the young shinobi. "What is the matter with you? You'd try and kill your own family?" he asked, turning to see Naruto standing on the railing and staring down at the boy. When the Suna Genin's final match finally came, Gaara used his sand to appear in the arena out of nowhere, and a boy named Lee, who had a bowl cut and a green bodysuit, leapt to confront him. As the match started, Gaara stood there while Lee launched his attack, with sand unavoidably blocking every blow. The boy leapt back, avoiding every Gaara counter. Lee got everyone's attention. "Might Guy," his sensei said, "take them off." "Hello, Sensei Guy." Ayan pulled off his leg weights, perplexed as to how weights could be so helpful, and then he dropped them, worried about Gaara because of the crash's craters. Lee abruptly vanished as his attack approached Gaara, making it nearly impossible for him to see each kick and punch. Gaara, however, remained strong, continuously pushing his sand out in an OTB around him, causing needles of sand to shoot out at the taijutsu user. Observing his teammate, everyone stared in disbelief as Kakashi said, "It's no wonder he is able to withstand this assault." Sakura, however, raised the awkward query, "Lee isn't using any chakra." "No." Might Guy shook his head. "Lee is unable to use any chakras. He can only employ taijutsu." The battle soon became more intense. It was between two incredibly strong shinobi, not genin. Lee slid to a halt and yelled, "8 gates." The opening gate. This time, Gaara was unable to react, and Lee's foot struck him in the chest, sending him flying into the opposite wall. Ayan gripped the railing, worry radiating from him over the Jinchuriki, and as the smoke cleared, they saw Gaara leave. Sand was floating around him, but that wasn't the most startling thing, or rather, it was a thin layer of sand with lines that resembled blue seals covering his body, and his hands had black claws at their ends. 2 weeks prior, Ayan was sparring with Gaara, pushing the boy back with his Baku. Gaara was good, had improved his sand skills from Shira, but still relied too much on it, so today they combined his attacks with sand and taijutsu. Gaara's taijutsu was weak, far weaker than Ayan's, and he wasn't a specialist by any means. Ayan tackled the other boy with his cat puppet and said, "I'm not getting this. Let's take a break." As Ayan considered ways to get better at taijutsu, an epiphany struck. "I have an idea. You and the One-Tail have an almost flawless connection," Gaara said, cocking his head at Ayan without saying anything. "Even though neither of you is a perfect Jinchuriki, you two are quite close. You can share chakra with each other thanks to the seal we put on you. I believe you could use some of it to make something akin to a chakra cloak." "Let's see if he's right." Shikaku, who was watching and enjoying his vessel being whooped by the boy, grinned. "This kid was clever," he said, wishing he were his vessel instead. Gaara usually had a passive defense made of sand, which created a shell around him, but this time it was different, and Ayan froze as demon chakra formed around him, but only for a moment. The chakra then infused into the sand, creating another layer of armor. One thing Ayan noticed was that Gaara's chakra level was insane at the moment. Blue lines went up his arms and legs, as well as his chest, neck, and face. His eyes turned black while his pupils were red. The sand came down his arms and hands until claws formed at the tips. Now, normally, Gaara's attack wouldn't have been that powerful, but this time, the sheer force broke Lee's forearm. Lee tried to kick his opponent, but Gaara's sand grabbed him and twisted his clawed hand, slashing across Lee's body before being thrown into the ground. Looking up at Shira, standing over a battered Lee, Gaara said, "You remind me of my teammate. You have a lot of potential," he said, as the sand retreated before returning to his gourd. "Don't waste it, others won't be as understanding." As he reappeared with his team, Gaara turned to face his friend and savior, Ayan. He'd have sparred the spandex boy too. Maybe he was proud of him. Ayan gave him a quick glance before grinning, and Gaara's heart began to race. When Choji Akamichi faced a boy named Dosu Kinyuta for the day's last match, he used a body expansion jutsu, which was effective but only held the Sound Shinobi. Choji sent sound waves into the larger boy until he broke down his defense, and the Konoha ninja was out after a brief battle. The Hokage said, looking down at them, "You all did a great job. The final tournament is in a month. Nin Suna, all of you have reached the final. You will therefore be accommodated here. Please feel free to use our training facilities." Ayan ran over to Naruto after being dismissed, but Team gave him a suspicious look. Nevertheless, Naruto grinned and said, "Naruto, come find me, please. You will learn a family kinjutsu from me." "Really?" Sakura rolled her eyes and said, "Traitor in the making." Ayan turned to the other members of Naruto's team and said, "You should shut your mouth." Naruto was beaming. "You're a pitiful kunoichi excuse. Given that he is related to us, I would prefer that Naruto live in Suna with us. He is twice as skilled as you two. You dare speak to me in that manner," said Sasuke, advancing. "I am an elite Uchiha. Our clan helped negotiate the peace between the Uchiha and the Senju," Ayan said, rolling his eyes. "A baby Uchiha doesn't scare me. So do you want to learn?" he would say, quickly transforming into the cheerful, vivacious boy. "It will be fantastic." Naruto stared at his team for a moment before shaking his head. "Hell yeah. I can't wait to pick up some awesome jutsu." They continued Naruto's training after meeting him at one of Konoha's numerous training grounds. Naruto had a resolve that Ayan had never witnessed before. For the past 4 days, they had been working on it. Yet Naruto continued to push his chakra to creating the chakra chains. Because of these, he would be a force that few people in the village could match. The blonde paused, then grinned at his cousin. "Hey Naruto." Ayan already cherished this child. He sincerely hoped that he could move in with him and his mother. Then he asked, "Yeah, what's up Ayan?" As if he were more than just a clansman. He had some theories about that method after reflecting on his clones. "Your mullet clone technique, how is it used?" I asked, finding it strange that the clones were so weak and unable to offer anything more. "Well, it's called the Muttley Shadow Clone Jutsu. I'm one of the only ones in the village that can use it because of my chakra," I guess, Naruto said after giving it some thought. Ayan produced a mannequin puppet and said, well, let me show you something. Making hand gestures, he said, puppet clone jutsu. I think your jutsu can do that and more. Naruto walked around the second clone, looking at it in shock. It's solid. Ayan laughed. Yeah, I made these so I could add more of myself to a battle if I needed to. Here's the thing though. Memories from these clones transfer to me. All of them. How do we test this out? Ayan asked with a smile. Take the clone to the trees and kill it in a creative way. Naruto quickly created a clone. After pulling the yelling clone behind it, Ayan exclaimed, I can do that. Boss, you can't let him do this. Ayan simply laughed as Naruto gaped at the scene and exclaimed, ah. You stabbed him with a poisoned kunai. This is amazing. I bet we can increase your learning. You'd be able to learn ninjutsu, fuinjutsu, and even taijutsu in no time. This is going to be an amazing experience. Ayan felt his excitement pulsing through him. His cousin's full potential was becoming apparent. Naruto was unprepared. He has no parents to restrain him. He was free to be whoever and do whatever he pleased. How many clones can you make? Asked Naruto, who was a little scared but also a little excited. Well, the most I've made is 1,000. Why? Ayan waited anxiously. Make 200. Have 100 practice the chakra chains. When one gets it, dispel it and then you can get the feeling. I want the other 100 to practice the taijutsu. Naruto looked around in disbelief. I already know how to fight. Ayan nodded. You were pretty good at taijutsu. I think you can be better though. It's our Uzumaki style. It's fast-paced and very close-ranged. You could combine it with your own brawling method. Ayan's chest warmed when he saw his cousin smile. 200 clones were created by the boy. From his crystal ball, Hiruzen observed. He was pleased and satisfied with what he was witnessing. Naruto had a genuine bond. What would happen if the boy came from a different village? Finally, he would have someone. Hey sensei, long time no see, Hiruzen exclaimed, blowing out his smoke, and jumped a little from his door that had been kicked open. Jiraiya, you could be more respectful, you know. Jiraiya waved him away, saying, before I found Minato's son, I wanted to ask about him. Jiraiya was relieved to see the man smile and said, he has met a family member. The Sannin were shocked and asked, what how? Apparently a boy from Suna is the son of Kyatsu Uzumaki. Jiraiya laughed, I've met her before. It was while I was investigating sightings of Orochimaru. Terrifying woman, probably one of the most skilled kanouchi I've ever met. Easily on her way to catching up to Tsunade. Well, she trained her son well. Ayan Uzumaki is a powerful combatant and skilled puppeteer. Jiraiya was now interested. He is also helping our own Jinchuriki right now. Jiraiya turned around and went directly to the door. Where was he going? Hiruzen asked. He simply waved and grinned, saying, I want to go see these two little Uzumaki. When he reached the training ground's edge, he witnessed Naruto and Ayan engaged in combat. Ayan was obviously holding back at the moment. However, Naruto became faster, more nimble, and employed a lot more technique as he defeated each of his clones. It was amazing to see. Off to his left, someone started clapping, and Ayan froze. The white-haired shinobi caught both Uzumaki's attention. Ayan recognized him, but Naruto did not. Ayan had committed the bingo book to memory. He was aware that he was staring at one of the best shinobi in Konoha. A legendary Sannin. I'm impressed, he said, bowing as he slowly backed away. I've heard you are an Uzumaki. Ayan asked, nodding but unable to find the right words. Even so, Naruto exclaimed, who the hell are you, old man? Does the academy not teach you anything these days? I am the great toad sage of Mount Myoboku. Jiraiya the gallant. With such a flamboyant display, Naruto roused Ayan from his stupor as Ayan stared at him as if he were insane. It was nearly incredulous that he was among the world's strongest men. But Naruto simply leaned over to ask, who is this guy? Ayan laughed as he looked at his cousin and said, that man is one of Konoha's greatest shinobi to ever live. He's right, Gaki. He glanced at the two boys before turning to face the background clones. Still not understanding why he was here, Naruto said, I want to train you. Ayan's gaze expanded. Really? Why? Asks the Jiraiya, who wants to train Naruto. Because you have potential. So, while this little puppet boy here can continue working with you on taijutsu and your kinjutsu. Naruto glanced at Ayan as if he had the, you need to do this. Jiraiya can help you with your chakra control. I already fixed your seal so he can just focus on you. Naruto and the white-haired shinobi departed after reaching an agreement. Ayan lingered a little while longer to check on the clones. How much Naruto could learn with this jutsu impressed him. While the clones continued, Ayan took a seat and began developing various sealing formulas. A smile appeared on his face. He placed the puppet on its side and called forth Byaku. Uzumaki style, life seal, he said, cutting his hand on the final hand seal and wiping the blood on the puppet after carefully and slowly moving the paintbrush over its body until the lines and symbols covered the entire puppet. As the puppet stood by itself, the lines came to life. He turned to see that his teammates had arrived to find him before dinner. Ayan-kun, how did you do that? He asked. I took parts of my cloning seal and applied it with my chakra to the puppet. So, it can move autonomously, Ayan said, jumping up and excitedly grabbing Gaara by the hand, making the sand ninja blush. Pain shot through Ayan's head before he could freak out. Ah, he exclaimed, and his vision shifted as he fell to the ground. He had another image of his head, but he could still see with his own eyes. The puppet was the source. Instinctively, his mind split into two halves. One for the puppet and one for him. He stood up and willed the puppet to move, saying, Ayan. With Gaara and Shira at his sides. I'm okay. Sorry. It leapt over them. Ayan fiddled with it a bit. It even ejected the blades from its side and launched needles from its mouth. Shira couldn't understand the puppet. Is it still a puppet? Ayan replied, yes, I'm controlling it, just not with chakra strings. I'll have to play with it before the final tournament. I think that I should be able to control a few of them like this. It may be too much to do more than 2 or 3 of them though. At some point, Baki joined them and grinned at their sensei, saying, Hi Baki-san. We will practice this new technique. I don't want you to push it too much. Ayan practiced his puppets for a few weeks. This new seal allowed him to apply it to 4 puppets at once. He therefore chose to use them on Byaku, Suzaku, Shinigami, and Futsumaki as puppets. Each of the 3 had their own advantages and was very mobile. He was able to use his other puppets at the same time since they were on their own. He was now in the center of the practice area. There are 3 puppets circling him. Byaku retaliated when Gaara tried to grab him with his sand. He was hardly shielded from the assault by his sand. Like a tiny gremlin, Futsumaki rolled across the ground, his bladed arm slicing down at the Jinchuriki. Shira attacked, taking advantage of the distraction. Shinigami materialized just as his foot was about to strike. Ayan shifted his foot to block the attack, striking the other boy in the chest. Shinigami launched an assault. However, Baki could see Ayan was holding back. He wasn't even certain that he could defeat the boy in single combat with this new method. Ayan took in the situation as the spar went on. Not even his other puppets had been brought out. Using his taijutsu instead, he was now better. Able to engage in close combat. All he has to do now is figure out how to get more physical strength. Unfortunately, that would have to wait. Simply put, there was not enough time. The match was called by Baki, come Genin. Each of the boys faced their sensei. It isn't a secret. You will all be at least Chunin after this mission. I am proud to have called you my Genin. Now remember you will need to continue to get stronger. Ayan, you are on the way of becoming a Jonin. Tomorrow is the tournament, which means that this is when our mission truly begins. What's the plan, sensei? Shira was curious. Our team will immediately move out to the eastern front. The puppet brigade will be waiting on the back side of the Iowa lines. Ayan's mother is bringing in 600 shinobi that will move in on all sides of the enemy force. We will aid that force. Baki paused long enough for Ayan to continue, saying, I can use all my puppets at one time to cover the Leaf Shinobi sensei. Gaara can take on multiple shinobi easily, and you and Shira are both really good in a straight fight. Sensei, Ayan said, let's fight with the Konoha defense in the village. Fine. What if they implore one of their Jinchuriki? Ayan's aura shifted. I won't let him win this time, sensei. Team Baki gathered at the arena the next day. As they all gathered, Hayate stood before the Genin. They had the support of the crowd. They were unaware that there were shinobi scattered throughout the village, anticipating the impending assault. Our first match will be Naruto Uzumaki vs Neji Hyuga. Naruto leapt to the arena below. He was wearing something closer to him now, which shocked Ayan. He was wearing an orange hoodie with the Uzumaki swirl on the back and upper sleeves in place of the orange jumpsuit. He was wearing black cargo shorts in place of the orange pants. Ayan assumed that the wrapping around his hands extended up his forearms. Naruto practically growled, screw your fate. I make my own fate. You should just surrender. You were fated to lose today. Ayan heard what the crowd had to say. Everyone was discussing how Neji would prevail. That he couldn't possibly prevail. But Ayan just grinned. No way Naruto can beat Neji, said Tenten, who wasn't too far away. Is he that good? Inquired Sakura. However, Lee enthusiastically nodded and said, yes. I've challenged him over 100 times and have never defeated him. Sakura asked accusingly, what's so funny, puppet boy? As everyone turned to watch Ayan laugh. He shrugged and grinned, saying, oh, you just don't understand how much stronger Naruto got this month. Ayan grinded his teeth in exasperation as Ino simply rolled her eyes and said, no way that idiot got that strong in a month. His hand was grabbed by Gaara's. Returning him to his regular self, he said, thanks Gaara. Numerous clones were made by Naruto once the match began. They all charged in at various angles. However, Neji moved quickly, handling them as though they were merely a bother. Up front and ranged fighters made up the next wave. However, Neji defeated the ones in close proximity before attacking the others with kunai and shuriken infused with chakra. I told you it was futile. You stand no chance at fighting me. You were dead last of your class, which means you're fated to be nothing but a nuisance for the rest of your life. Naruto sighed. Being a prodigy and being born great means nothing. I choose my destiny. Neji was confronted by Naruto before anyone could respond. The two boys were shooting at one another. It was amazing how well Naruto understood his new taijutsu. This was unlike any fight Sakura had ever witnessed. Since when can Naruto fight like that? Asked Rock Lee, who was also observing, in disbelief. Ayan grinned proudly and said, I told you he got stronger. Naruto delivered quick, accurate close-range blows, displacing the Hyuga. Though not as effectively as he should have, he was striking Naruto's chakra points. Naruto smirked and flipped back. Suddenly, a number of clones showed up with a flurry of explosive tags. However, Neji stunned everyone by spinning and forming a chakra orb in the center of the arena. The way these two children were fighting astounded Hayate. Hundreds of Narutos crowded the arena, but Naruto persisted, saying, multi-shadow clone jutsu. I told you, you cannot win. They confronted the Hyuga head-on while charging. As he continued spinning to gain the upper hand, explosions were occurring. He was only being set up by Naruto. Neji took advantage of the situation and launched an attack on the main body, using 8 trigrams, 64 palms. Naruto was hit by attacks until it toppled over. When Ayan saw his cousin on the ground, he became motionless. Then 4 chains emerged from a nearby tree, slamming the Hyuga into the wall after wrapping him. You are great. I'd say you are better than even Sasuke Tem. I don't know why you think fate is predetermined. I do know though that the village has hated me as long as I can remember. I'll get stronger and one day the village will acknowledge me, Naruto said, holding the other boy up by the chains as he started to leave. Winner is Naruto Uzumaki. The audience was momentarily stunned before going wild. Ayan cheered with them, unable to contain his smile. Sakura fell silent in shock. She never would have imagined that Naruto could defeat someone like Neji. After Naruto and Neji had left the field, Hayate said, next match is Sasuke Uchiha vs Gaara of the Sand. Gaara entered the field using his sand, which he used almost like a shushin. Sasuke, however, never showed up. Ayan scanned the area to see if he was present. They skipped to Shira vs Shikamaru after waiting. Without hesitation, Shikamaru attempted to use his shadow binding jutsu to capture Shira. Shira tried to take the lead by using his superior speed. He leapt back to avoid the shadow just as he was ready to approach Shikamaru. 7 Heaven Breathing Technique. He punched the ground, causing Shikamaru to be hit by a shockwave of debris. He appeared beside the shadow user and kicked the Nara hard, knocking her back. Ayan believed the battle was over. Shadow possession complete. Shira appeared beside a nearly defeated Shikamaru, only to freeze. Wow, you still managed to get me. Shira was so shocked that he stopped breathing. I surrender. Shikamaru raised both of their hands in excruciating pain. Everyone cheered. Winner is Shira of Suna. But Ayan had to concede that Shikamaru would be very successful if he led a team. Ayan Uzumaki vs Shino Aburame is the next match. Ayan leapt down, eager to get into battle. Shino looked like Gaara had earlier, but instead of sand, he had bugs. Begin. 3 puppets emerged in the middle of the arena in a puff of smoke. He was joined by Nanto and Hokuto. The chakra was illuminating their staffs. Tenio, the third puppet, had a mystical form. Shino launched a wave of bugs in Aien's direction, but they stopped as soon as they reached the barrier. For a moment, Shino froze. Aien launched Tenyo in the direction of the bug user. He blocked the ceiling fabric with his bugs. It opened its mouth and shot Shino with needles. He barely escaped the attack by leaping back. He became more confident as he turned to face Aien. The chakra string had been followed into the barrier by bugs. Aien was covered in bugs, shocking Gaara. Aien screamed and fell to the ground, knocking over all 3 puppets. Shino went over to the boy who had fallen. "What?" Hayate asked, turning into a dummy in a puff of smoke as he was ready to call the match. His Tonto leapt from the ground and struck Shino's neck. Shino was aware that he would have died in a real fight. He noticed that the puppet user's green eyes resembled shinobi eyes. A real shinobi. He was outclassed by Aien, who said, "I surrender, Hayate-san." Aien Uzumaki declared, "You are really good, Shino-san." He smiled and put his Tonto away. Winner is Aien Uzumaki. "Thank you, Aien-san. You were quite skilled yourself. I hope that the next time we meet I am at your level," Shino said, turning to face the boy. At last, it was Sasuke's and Gaara's turn. When Sasuke arrived, Gaara was already on the field. Kakashi grinned and said, "Sorry we're late." Gaara prepared herself for battle. Feathers dropped onto the crowd just as Sasuke was about to start. Aien's eyes began to swell. "Release," I said, opening them wide. He glanced around and pulled out his Tonto in time to block a sound ninja's blow. After killing the enemy with a wind blade, Baki said, "Help Sakura wake the surrounding genin and get out to the village. Shira and I will assist here before joining you and Gaara." Aien approached Sakura and said, "Hi sensei. What's happening?" Sakura stared at the boy in disbelief and said, "Otogakure and Iwagakure are both attacking. Let's wake everyone up, then I have to join the fight." He was smaller than the other boys her age because he was roughly her size overall. He was prepared to fight and lose his life for another village, though. Gaara felt movement in his peripheral vision just as he was about to attack. With his Sharingan active, Sasuke's eyes grew wide, swerving to avoid a fatal blow to him. The 2 ninjas who attempted to kill him were crushed by the sand that flew past him, Sasuke Uchiha. He turned to face the Jinchuriki and said, "Our match is on hold for now. Your village is in danger." Aien called forth the enormous bird puppet Suzuku. He leapt onto its back and took off. It was already occupied by Naruto, who said, "I'm coming with you, Aien-kun." Grabbing his shirt, Naruto exclaimed, "This is my village. I'm coming with you." "What? Absolutely not." The redhead sighed and grumbled, "Okay, we're going to grab Gaara." The bird flew into the arena, snatched 2 ninja, and crushed them, saying, "Gaara, come on." "Why is the Dobi here?" Sasuke and Gaara both leapt onto the puppet. "Same reason you are Tem. The village needs me." Naruto glared at Sasuke. Looking at Aien, Sasuke grinned and said, "I'm pretty fast. We are going to split up 2 and 2. Sasuke, how fast are you?" Sok nodded as Aien lowered the puppet and said, "I'm going to drop you 2 on this side of the village. Help the shinobi and cover the civilians." The puppet landed on the roof of a tall building. Gaara did the same. "All right Naruto, let's go." Iwa's troops had managed to block. This attack was led by Kyatsu and her group. Tamari was leveling the Iwa lines with great wind attacks. Among the few puppeteers on the front was Konkuro. The others struck the Iwa shinobi from behind. Kyatsu moved at dizzying speeds while drawing her katana. As it cut and separated limb, her blade was covered in a blurred hue. She slid to a halt and turned to see 8 more shinobi. She sent a huge stream of water that crushed bodies and destroyed trees while making a single-handed sign. She eyed the approaching ninja and said, "Take on the sand shinobi. I will handle her." He was completely armored. He had a huge hat over his masked face. "Are you the Jinchuriki known as Han?" Aien asked, matching the description of the Jinchuriki who had injured her. As he flew at her, he said, "So, what if I am?" The ground where she had just been standing was smashed by his fist. She glared into his soul as she landed on a tree, saying, "Because you hurt my son, so I'm going to hurt you now." The Jinchuriki's own chakra began to form around her body as a red aura began to form around it, saying, "You'll die Uzumaki." They were a blur of motion all of a sudden. Parring, attacking, and blocking. Tamari was taken aback. She was aware of her sensei's strength, but this. Her sensei grinned, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. This was absurd. Gaara caught 2 sound shinobi with his sand. He could hear fighting around the corner. and as he crushed them, blood burst out. Pathetic. They thought a force like this could take on Kanagaker. He was lifted into the air by his sand, and when he looked down, he saw that Sasuke was defending a few civilians, rushing from one ninja to another. Sand spikes. Before killing the ninja in front of him, sand turned into spikes and shot out beneath Sasuke. The two boys looked up and looked at each other. Before taking on his next opponent, Sasuke gave a nod. Debris exploded into the air before Gaara could move on to the next adversary. His expression was one of shock before he turned to face a gigantic snake. This is annoying. Sand smashed into the snake from behind him. A ninja materialized behind him before he could attack it once more. He punched Gaara, sending him crashing into the ground as his sand just managed to rise in time. His last line of defense was broken. In front of him, the shinobi fell. He had his long hair tied in a topknot with red and black tips. He was wearing blue robes with an odd rope around his waist that said, "A little monster lost his way. Can't wait to cover your sand in your own blood." Civilians were escorted out of the village by hundreds of blonde, blue-eyed clones in another area. Ayan was flying around the village with his Suzaku, observing a massive snake traveling to the main Naruto location. He summoned Shinigami and sent it hurtling in its direction. In a matter of seconds, Shinigami's scythe slashed up and down its body as it spun. As its body was sliced into pieces, blood poured down from the sky. He sent the twins, Byako, and Futsumaki out. After landing, the twins cooperated to eliminate the ninja while providing defense for the civilians. However, Futsumaki ended up with Naruto, as the enemy ninja attempted to retaliate, spinning and leaping at them. In the battle against the sound shinobi, Naruto assisted the puppet. Naruto exclaimed, "Your puppets are so cool, Ayan," before rescuing a second civilian from the debris. "Thanks. Futsumaki is my favorite." Ian's distorted voice emerged from the open mouth as the puppet climbed up onto Naruto's shoulder. Suddenly, Gaara crashed into the adjacent building. He could hardly stand as he stepped outside. "Naruto, run." His blue lines were fading and his sand cloak was cracking. The ninja materialized between them before Naruto could respond. "You think you could just die already, punk?" His huge body was torn with muscle, and he kicked Gaara once more, sending him flying through the air. When Naruto screamed, he was struck in the air. Futsumaki leapt and slashed at the man, but he was too quick, preventing every attack. He grabbed the puppet and smashed it to nothing, saying, "Interesting. A Uzumaki and a puppet controlled by one. I've been looking for my clansman for so long, you know." After a brief period of shaking, Naruto heard what sounded like birds chirping. Sasuke tried to slam his hand into the man as he flew past him, but it was engulfed in lightning. He only sidestepped just as his attack was about to land. He retaliated with his own, punching the Uchiha repeatedly before kicking him into Naruto. As he flew to Gaara and his cousin, Ayan felt desperate. The man leapt away from Gaara after Shinigami nearly struck him. He flipped over the enormous bird-like puppet when Suzaku tried to grab him. Ayan landed between this shinobi and Gaara. In front of him were Tenyo and Genbu. A barrier separated Sasuke and Naruto from the twin puppets. His smile turned sadistic as he said, "What's this? To think that Kyatsu had a brat." He practically snarled. Ayan sensed something within. Chakra chains slowly rose from the man's back, and he said, "I'm going to enjoy leaving your pathetic body for her." It was a mixture of fear and familiarity. Between a few shinobi, Shira landed. He kicked and punched each of them, knocking them out cold because his speed was too quick for them. As they faced ninja after ninja, Baki was hiding his weaknesses. They were fighting with Hayate and Genma, a ninja. Their abilities astounded him. Each ninja's strength was equal to that of his sensei. After Baki sliced another ninja in half with a wind blade, Shira turned to face his sensei and said, "Hi. Shira, we are moving." They jumped onto a roof and saw a giant toad landing on a snake in the distance. "We need to regroup with Ayan and Gaara." "Sensei, what's wrong?" Baki asked, but he took a while to answer. Rather, they continued until they came across Ayan and his puppets engaged in combat with a ninja. It was cruel. This ninja was powerful and swift. Jinchuriki strength, almost. Not far away, Gaara lay on the ground. "Shira, grab Gaara and get him out of here," he exclaimed, his body battered and appearing to be out of chakra. As his sensei went to assist Ayan, Shira obeyed, saying, "Sensei. No, this man is too much for you. Go." As he landed, he took the sand Jinchuriki by the arm and said, "I got you." However, Gaara began to resist, saying, "No. I have to help Ayan. Right now, you'd just be in the way. Shira was caught off guard when fire burst out. Ayan was on top of Kinja, and Baki was hiding his face. He gains mobility from the snake puppet, saying, "Sensei. He's an Uzumaki." However, Baki chose to attack rather than reply. Tenyo and Shinigami were moving together. Naruto felt so worthless as he watched with Sasuke. The man then said, summoning jutsu, Demon Okira, while biting his thumb. In the village, a gigantic monster materialized. It was enormous. It had a huge mouth and a white body. It nearly grinned at them with its pointed black teeth. It had a muscular upper body and a slender lower body. When Ayan saw Baki in its enormous clawed hands, he said, "I'm over you." It squeezed, and Ayan felt tears well up in his eyes. Before it dropped Baki's body to the ground below, blood exploded out. As he and his puppets battled the monster together, Ayan's chakra encircled them. This was the first time Gaara had ever seen Ayan like this. He was furious. His chakra enhanced his puppets. They still couldn't communicate with the ninja. Genbu was thrown to the ground by a shock wave that struck it with a swipe of its wrist. When Kinja started to squeeze the arm, it reached out and pulled, shattering the puppet. As Suzaku flew around the monster, Ayan looked down with unwavering resolve. Ayan called back the other puppets, knowing they would be destroyed, while Shinigami was right behind them, dodging the blows. It was distracted by Byaku's biting and slashing at its legs. Summoning jutsu, Naruto abruptly materialized, perched atop the head of a massive toad. "What, Jiraiya, why did you summon me here?" he exclaimed. He glanced at his newest summoner and said, "You had to bring me here to battle one of the vengeful Oni of the Shinigami." "Fine. Sorry Gamabuta boss. I need your help though." Ayan was astounded by the toad's leap's height as it launched him into the air. The Uzumaki and his demon were showered with enormous water bullets. He was holding his own even with the giant toad's assistance. Ayan was running and hitting him with his speed. Shinigami and Suzaku were too fast for this man. The demon's ankles were being sliced by his Byaku. Sasuke looked on in disbelief. The Dobi and that foolish puppet user were engaged in a cage-level battle, and the Dobi was winning. Uchiha, on the other hand, was stuck in the background. How could he have experienced this? He was superior to this. As the two Uzumaki battled this weird shinobi, rage filled his chest. The ninja vanished from the top of the demon's head just as Ayan was ready to strike. He was sailed to the ground below by a strong punch. Gaara's sand reached out and caught him just as he was ready to strike. Looking down at him, his best friend said, "Ayan, I've got you." Naruto was still fighting with the toad against the demon in the background as the two Suna boys were standing against the Uzumaki. He smirked but stopped when the cube-shaped barrier disappeared in the background. "Seems it's your lucky day. Tell your mother something for me." Before either boy could react, a Shinto punched Ayan in the chin, sending him flying into the air. The man behind him caught Ayan off guard and said, "Tell her Shinto is still alive for me." Shinto's foot struck Gaara's chest, causing him to crash through multiple buildings as the sand moved. Shira and Sasuke both fell silent in shock as the man abruptly vanished with lightning speed. Han's enhanced fist was avoided by Kyatsu. She twisted her katana so that the hilt was in his neck. She spun around and slashed his chest, rupturing his armor. Jumping back, he glared at the Uzumaki. "So be it." A massive chakra version of the two tails appeared around him. Kyatsu hesitated as a huge black orb began to form in its mouth. But she refused to let him murder her shinobi. Her chakra chains smashed in and around him after she let them go. Shock and a hint of fear widened Han's eyes. He had regained control of his beast during the battle in Uzugakure when he was younger. From that battle, there was one thing to remember. You had to be afraid of the Uzumaki. Her chakra chains broke his momentum, ending the stalemate. Kyatsu moved when he noticed a gap in Han's defenses. Blood spurted from his mask as her katana pierced his stomach. As the Konoha shinobi moved in to help her men and women, she could feel their chakra signatures all around her. Kyatsu glared at him as she lifted him up with one of her chains, saying, "I'm going to let you live. Only because my baby lived. If I see you again or if you threaten my son again, I'll destroy you." After dropping the Jinchuriki, Kyatsu turned and walked out of the field. She had to see that her son was all right. Jiraiya was outside the shinobi hospital with his newest apprentice. Gaara and Ayan Uzumaki were both in critical condition. Their opponent had been incredibly strong. Sannin, the toad, believed he had been playing with them. Like a kid playing with ants, toying with them. In light of what he saw, that was noteworthy. Ayan was a shinobi of the Jonin level. In fact, now that everything had transpired, he was certain that Sunagaku would promote him. He would pose a serious threat to any of Suna's adversaries once he had all of his puppets on par with the Shinigami puppet. "Where is my son?" When Jiraiya turned around, she saw a stunning woman with red hair. She had an elaborate katana on his hip and was dressed in a Suna flak jacket. He recognized the likeness to Ayan. Apparently noticing, Naruto leapt from his chair and asked, "Are you Ayan-kun's mom?" She insisted, "Yes, and who are you?" A sense of maternal protection and authority emanates from the statement, "Naruto Uzumaki." Ayan is sleeping in his hospital bed, lady. Her eyes gleamed with shock. "Uzumaki." She briefly smiled and said, "Yup. Name's Naruto Uzumaki and I'll be the greatest ninja of all time, believe it." She knelt down and examined him, saying, "It's good to see another clansman, little Naruto." "Kyatsu Uzumaki, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I am Jiraiya the Gallant. Your son is going to be fine. A few broken bones and severe chakra exhaustion, but other than that, he fought extremely well," Jiraiya exclaimed, laughing before introducing himself. Her lips began to pucker up. "Thank goodness. I was worried. Do we know who it was that fought him?" Not many people could take on two Jinchuriki. One with the Toad summoning contract and the other in a partial transformation. Plus, a Jonin-level puppet user. She turned around and saw Ameno and Shira standing there. Kyatsu-san. However, Shira's expression was concerning. He called himself Shinto. "I think he knew you. He had a vendetta against Ayan-kun." Jiraiya was familiar with that look from her years of eavesdropping. She recognized this person. Her eyes were filled with fear. She was afraid of this man for some reason. "You know who it was?" she asked. She sounded almost desperate as she said, "Yes. I need to talk to the Hokage." However, Jiraiya's breath caught as he said, "Hiruzen is gone. He was killed by Orochimaru. You need to breathe." "Who is he?" Jiraiya placed his hand on her shoulder and said, "Damn it. Damn it. They waited until I told them. I'll let you know when Ayan wakes up. He will need to tell too." A few hours later, both Gaara and Ayan were awake. Together with Jiraiya and Naruto, Kyatsu's team and her son's team assembled in their room. "Mom," Ayan says as she walks in with everyone, "Baki-sensei." Hesha. Kyatsu saw the glossiness in her boy's eyes. They lost their sensei. Ayan had already surpassed him. Gaara did the same. Shira wasn't going to be that far behind them forever. Pulling him into a hug, "I know. I'm sorry, sweetie. We need to talk." Ayan wiped his eyes while he nodded. "About Shinto?" "Yeah." Kyatsu sat down with everyone around him and said, "Shinto and I both survived the battle at Uzugakure. We didn't know where to go, so we decided to head to Konoha." Naruto raised his eyebrows in disbelief. "You never came here though." Kyatsu replied, "No, we didn't. On our travels we discovered that Konoha had abandoned us. The second Hokage feared that we were too much of a threat. So, he left us to our fate. Shinto and I were both furious at the time. While the war was going on, we were searching for ways to gain power. Uzumaki legends said that ninjutsu started as ninshu from the Sage of Six Paths. That there are other worlds and realms that have powerful entities. From gods to monsters. Ayan was paying close attention. His mother was looking for a means of annihilating this town. We accessed a realm that was considered forbidden by our ancestors. The Nether Realm is a realm that was once home to the Shinigami. When they moved to become Reapers of Death, they left this realm of Oni behind. Uzumaki used to have a gate in the center of our village that we would summon and seal creatures of all kinds. We figured out how to use this. Shinto though met a devil. The devil promised him the power he needed to destroy Konoha. He had to kill what was closest to him though. The Toad Sage's words reverberated throughout the room. He had to kill you. Kyatsu declined. Instead, she said, "I met Sasori around this time. He was different then. Still distant, but he was kind and wanted someone to love just like I did. When Shinto caught up with me, he faced us both. The battle was long. It lasted nearly 4 days. We won and I thought he died." The puppet user was suddenly overcome with emotion. He had to be concerned about more than just his father pursuing him. He was now concerned about his insane demonic clansman, saying, "I don't know what to say." With assurance, Gaara declared, "We will kill him. We will destroy him just like he will try with us." Shira, who was grieving the loss of their sensei, put his hand on Ayan's shoulder and said, "Gaara is right. We will get stronger together." They started discussing how their training made Naruto feel yearning. He realized he would probably never have this when he considered his own team. Ayan and his group appeared to be very close. He was constantly mistreated by Sakura and Sasuke, acting as though he were a monster. Naruto only desired recognition, to have companions who would stand by him in this way. Don't worry Gaki, you'll get something like this one day. Jiraiya put his hand on Naruto's head. Now we have something else to discuss. Everyone paused and gazed at the Toad Sannin. The third Hokage died in the fighting. Jiraiya sobbed and said, we will have to find a replacement. Naruto, I know you were close, so I want you to be at the funeral. Naruto's heart tightened. What? Gigi heed, but he's the strongest. Jiraiya shook his head and said, yes, they will. They won't say no to me. He was looking at his master when he said, but pervy sage. The village won't let me there. Jiraiya turned to face the Suna shinobi and said, okay, thank you sensei. We owe you tremendously for helping our village. Jiraiya laughed and said, well when the time comes, you'll have my help. Kyatsu shrugged and said, you know we will probably have to take you up on a favor ladder. Then Naruto entered his apartment. He had just bid his new cousin farewell. He had returned to his solitude. As he sat in his room, he looked around in an attempt to identify the sensation in his chest. Previously, he had simply moved on. He was returning to his normal self. But he had a great rapport with Ayan and his group. Naruto had never met people with whom he could get along so easily. He was constantly looking for better ways to be happier. Regretfully, everyone's doubt about him seemed to be amplified today. He was despised by his team. Treated him badly despite his conviction that he was now the team's strongest member. His new kinjutsu, summons, and taijutsu no longer really held up. Not to mention the power boost he received from the Kyuubi. But here he was. His own team continues to treat him like garbage. Shikamaru and Choji were two of his few friends. Even then, they were merely acquaintances at most. He simply couldn't understand this. Yes, he possessed a demon, but none of his former classmates were aware of it. Why does everyone else care if Ayan and his friends don't? Naruto got up, took off his jacket, and went to the bathroom to take a shower and get into bed. When someone grabbed him, he yelled, damn it. Let me go. He attempted to fend them off, but they hit him with yellow gas instead. He noticed 3 unmarked Anbu looking down at him as the world began to fade. When he woke up, the world was blurry. With heavy eyes, Naruto searched the cell for a clue, but he was unable to find anything. Our weapon has been returned. He noticed a man wearing bandages in front of the cell. Now, I am headed to accept my place as Hokage. Don't let our pet out till I have returned. We will need to break him before we gain control, he said, holding a cane and covering his right eye. It took Ayan and his group 3 days to get back home. The majority of their combatants had made it out alive, mostly because of his mother. It seems that she had fought Han head-to-head and completely destroyed him. Ayan was aware of his mother's strength. It was different, though, to hear about her going all out. Without a doubt, she was Suna's strongest Jonin. His mother's voice caught his attention. Ayan. There was hardly any competition. Yes mom, she laughed. I have to report to the council about our battle. I'll also take the scroll holding Baki's body. He had no family, but I will make sure his friends know of his death. Ayan gave her the scroll as tears welled up in his eyes. Knowing that his sensei had passed away still didn't seem real. Baki lost his life defending and assisting him. A man who had previously treated him with such contempt. Being aware of how Baki had grown to be significant to him before his departure. He couldn't keep him safe. Are you okay, Ayan? He asked, glancing up to see Gaara. Despite his lack of emotion, Ayan could see it. Deep inside Gaara was hurting as much as he and Shira. I will be. It's weird you know. He had hated us when we joined up as genin together. Then he died protecting us. Well you two were and well are kind of scary. They both looked at Shira. When we were allowed to become genin, Gaara had no control over his killing intent. Then you were a puppet user that could fight Gaara by yourself and are the son of one of the strongest puppet users that ever existed. It's kind of super scary. Then there is you, who can't use chakra but have a technique that will rival both of use in pure power. Ayan chuckled, and even Gaara grinned. Yes. The remark caused Shira to flush. He was still unaccustomed to receiving praise. Well, we better get to work. We are the strangest team in Sunakage history after all, Ayan said, putting his arms around each of their necks. Shira smirked confidently and said, yeah, we need to get ready for some payback. The stoic Gaara nodded, adding, Plus we need to help kick Oto out of our country once and for all. They turned around and saw Tamari, Konkuro, and Ameno standing there, saying, "Don't forget about us." Ayan smiled uncontrollably. According to Gaara, someone has to make sure you idiots don't hurt yourself, you know. He was still having problems with his siblings, but things appeared to be improving. As he turned around, he saw the villagers welcoming the shinobi and Kanauchi who had returned from combat. "We need to get stronger," Ayan said. "We need to protect our people." Shira remarked, "Let's do our best. And maybe others." Kyatsu entered the council room. She was revered by many members of the shinobi council. Some others were terrified. She was obviously the strongest person in the village based on the mission reports they got via Messenger Hawk. Even the late Rasa would have been defeated by her in battle if she had so desired. "We've read your report on the battle. What is the overall strength of Konoha?" Kyatsu gave a slight bow before responding, "They are still strong. It was suicide for Otokagir to engage the village the way it had. With the death of Hiruzen, though, our ally nation is going to be in turmoil." "You believe that they won't handle the shift well?" She nodded. "I don't think so. I don't know why, but my gut is telling me that it won't end well." "How well?" a senior member replied. "I think we are primed for another war. It may take a couple of years, but Iowa has had its eye on us for some time. Not mention Kumo has been looking for a reason to knock Konokagir down a peg." She turned to face the council and said, "That is why we have an offer." They all appeared to have come to a decision. Granny Chio and her brother were visible when the door behind her opened. Both of them were grinning. She put a hand on Kyatsu's arm and said, "Hello, dearie. I'm glad you and Ayan are okay. Chio. We would like to offer you the position of Case Cage. It is normally only given to the Case Cage clan, but none of those children are ready. Whomever you decide to prep for the role we'll accept," Kyostu said, still bewildered as he turned to face the council. "Even Gaara," the individual replied. "Yes, he has changed. He is also now slowly gaining a reputation in the village. One day he may be seen as more than just a military asset or monster by them." Kyatsu considered this. Leading a village had never been her dream. Unless it was a recreation of Uzushiokagir. The elders both nodded as they looked at each other. "I'll do it. There is much we need to do. Starting with kicking Otokagir out of our borders. Then we will have the ceremony in 3 days' time. Inform your son and team. A temporary Jonin will be assigned to escort your team on missions. However, you will still be given time to train them." She thought this was fair. After a pause, someone asked, "What of my son's team?" "A decent one nonetheless. It has been decided to promote Team Baki. Though we figured you'd want to give them their promotions." A ninja approached her and gave her a scroll. The page displayed all of their ranks, as well as every rank from the Chunin exam that was held locally. The smile came over her face as she said, "Thank you. I'll tell them as soon as I'm able." Ayan had already returned to his puppetry. The condition of Futsumaiki was the worst. Shinto had completely crushed it. Kinja and Genbu came next. They were targets simply because they were his largest and most defensive puppets. Overall, they fared well despite taking quite a beating. Byako had minor damage but was otherwise in good condition. In contrast, Sazuku, the Shinigami, and his twins were all in reasonably good health. "My seal worked well. I think I can push more of my chakra through them to make my puppets even more powerful," he said quietly to himself. Ayan reviewed his blueprints. Really, he was down to just 2. One was simple. He could use the seahorse as a conduit for his water release. It gives him a significant edge in damp conditions. Normally, he wouldn't have to worry about it. The other one he had was more of a dream. It was dubbed Puppet Mecha by him. It would be a huge puppet that could move around and carry amazing weapons. It would require internal control of the machine to operate. He realized he might require an equalizer after witnessing the tailed beast's strength up close. Thus, this was his answer. Ayan hadn't even realized his workshop door had opened as he made his way back to his Futsumaiki. Sand gradually encircled his wrist as he worked to add a retractable spike to his left arm. A line of sand pulled Ayan around to face Gaara, who seemed hesitant and said, "Hello, Ayan." Ayan couldn't help but blush, as if he were using a magnifying glass to examine the other boy. "Are you okay?" I asked, attempting to see into his soul. The Jinchuriki clearly didn't believe him when he said, "I'm good, Gaara. We lost our sensei. I may not have been fond of Baki-san, but he had been growing on me," he said, stepping over to sit beside him. As he nodded gravely, Ayan laughed and said, I think people in general are growing on you, Gaara. You are correct. It sucks. Sighing deeply, I know my clan were powerful. We didn't just lose though, Gaara. He absolutely destroyed us. It wasn't even a contest. Naruto and I managed to hold the assault, but he was holding back. Just playing with us. Ayan ran his hands through his locks. My clan was powerful. They sealed away monsters and gods in their little village. It almost like someone orchestrated their demise. What if I could go back to Uzushio though? Remake it even better, you know. There are still Uzumaki. They just forgone their surname. I could bring them back. Maybe bring the survivors from the Kekkei Genkei purges in Kiri. Indeed, they were not your typical genin, even though they might have been. Naruto is Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi and possessed a huge toad summons that could fight for him. Even though Ayan detested Sasuke, he was the last of the Uchiha and not to be laughed at. At that time, Gaara had strong sand jutsu and was practically a perfect Jinchuriki on his own. Each of them was different in some way. It wasn't foolish of him to believe they wouldn't go off and do something. Simply put, he had no idea what that would be for them. Rather, he merely wished to ensure that his clan could continue to thrive as it had. Wait, why are you here? Ayan asked, glancing at the bewildered boy. As if he understood, Gaara said, your mother asked us to gather here. What do you mean us? He asked. With a gentle smile, Shira entered and said, Ayan, Gaara. Your mother and her team are outside waiting for us. He saw Temari, Kankuro, and Amino waiting for them as he followed his team into the yard. Still with a dejected expression, Temari said, hey guys. I'm sorry about your sensei. He died defending us in the village, so what's this about? Ayan said, his eyes welling with tears. It's okay. I have a couple of things. First off, I want to tell you I will be tied up with new work. The entire team appeared concerned. What? Then who will train us? Don't worry guys, I have already picked someone to take over. Maki Tojo is going to be your sensei, but don't worry. I'll still be there to teach you as you grow. You'll always be my genin team. Ayan was perplexed. What's the job though? The three Cage children froze. What? Temari didn't mean any disrespect when she said, I am going to be acting Cage until one of you three are ready to take the mantle. How is that possible? She asked in confusion. The council decided that I will be the one that teaches you how to lead this village. It's just a matter of who it will be. Nobody was sure what to say. Gaara appeared to be thinking about something when she said, I don't want to be Cage. Why wouldn't you? Temari asked, staring at him bewildered. Gaara turned to his group. I'll go wherever Ayan goes. If he wants to stay in Suna or go and recreate Uzushiokage, I'll be there to support him and Shira. I'll protect them no matter what, he said to the children he came to trust more than anyone else in his life. At last, Ayan snapped. His eyes were now streaming with tears. It was unbelievable to him. Gaara desired to assist him. You mean that Gaara? Shira was staring at him in disbelief, even though he wasn't sure what he wanted to do. Of course, you two are my friends. Shira laughed. Same here. If that's what you two want to do, I'll get stronger and make sure we can achieve anything. Kankuro laughed. You really are the best thing to happen to our little brother. Anyway, what else, sensei? With a mixture of nervousness and excitement, all the children, with the exception of Gaara, straightened up. I would like to offer you all your promotions. The council will have something more official in front of the village. I wanted to give you your rankings now before you stood before everyone. You each have been promoted to Chunin, said Temari, Kankuro, and Ameno, all three standing erect and beaming. They were all stunned. The Jonin that I'm assigning to you will be there just to make sure you are good as a team, and you will continue to improve until you each become Jonin yourself. Now for Team Baki here. You went through more than most shinobi your age do. Gaara and Shira. She turned to face her son and his team, and both boys paused as she said this. Shira was anxious, and Gaara was curious, so she said, you have both been promoted to Chunin. What? They promoted me? Shira exclaimed, looking down at his hands in shock. Shira-kun, you are strong. You'll only get stronger. Nobody can dispute that now. Tears began to fall. He whipped his eyes and nodded, saying, thank you, Kyatsu-sama. Ayan sat perplexed. His heart fell. Why hadn't he received a promotion yet? Wasn't he strong, too? Were they truly still against him because of his father? He had even engaged in combat with Jinchuriki. The ideal Jinchuriki. A glance at his mother, Ayan said, now my baby. As he started to fidget with his prosthetic, she paused and said, you have been promoted. His heart leapt, to the rank of Jonin. What? Exclaimed everyone. He had no idea how that was possible. Ayan, you have multiple chakra natures. You are a master puppet user. At this point you're already the best in the village with your control seals. Not to mention you are the second best Fuinjutsu user. It kind of hit him after his mother revealed everything. Now you still need to improve. We need to increase your skills in Kenjutsu and Taijutsu so you can fight with your puppets now. I'll have a whole regiment for you. One I'm sure your friends will help you with. He was genuinely better after all the training and preparation. Following that, they had a very busy few days. His mother's replacement as Kazekage was celebrated with a ceremony. Everyone was present and applauded her. It meant a lot to the village to be the first Kanouchi Kage. However, no one questioned her authority, being the sole person who had the potential to challenge Rasa. Following the ceremony, they received their flak jackets. Gaara declined to wear his. Ameno and Konkuro are the same. Ayan, Tamari, and Shira, however, adored them. It served as confirmation of their new status. They also kept up their training. Get ready for the next conflict. Ayan learned more about the state of the world than he had ever known before after becoming a Jonin. Things seemed to be developing along the borders following the Konoha battle. In case Suna retaliated, Iwa had shinobi stationed at their border. After losing their cage, Kurigakure appeared to be in disarray and was relocating all of their activities within their own boundaries. His mother had been occupied with sending out missions. It seems that his and his team's performances during the Battle of Konoha made them extremely well liked. Thus, Suna was receiving missions at an unprecedented rate. Although his team had not yet been deployed, he was confident that it would happen soon, particularly in light of her efforts to remove Odogakure-related content from their nation. There were bases across the nation, according to their Anbu. They had already tallied more than a dozen. Each one is extremely difficult to find. But his mother would have none of it. She would see to it that they received each one. I have a mission for you all. A- rank. Ayan was finally called to his mother's office, where he met with 3 other shinobi. Sounds good, Mom. What are we looking at? She laughed at her son's lack of fright. The Wind Daimyo wants to make peace talks with Iwa. So the has asked to have a guard force with him. I could only offer him 4 shinobi. Korikyo, Maki, Ayan, and Gento. You are all picked for this mission. The daimyo is your priority. He will have his personal samurai guard as well. Make sure he gets home. Ayan felt his heartbeat increase. His first mission as a Jonin was this one. He would ensure that he demonstrated his position here. Ayan grinned at Korikyo as they left the village, saying, "It's nice to see you again, Korikyo-san." Korikyo nodded, "Same. I'm sorry to hear about Baki-san. He was a good friend and a talented shinobi." Korikyo now had a wrap around his head to shield him from the sun. Yeah, it sucks he is gone. He was aware that Maki was a shinobi. She was a new Jonin, too. Evidently a strong user of binding cloth. She was unremarkable overall due to her long brown hair and brown eyes. Gento was older, most likely in the late 30s. He carried 2 small sand pouches close to his hips and a sword on his back. Evidently an expert manipulator of sand. Something that Gaara's new persona was making more and more well-liked. Smiled Korikyo, "I am glad you're here. A puppet user is valuable in foreign territory. From what I heard you're ever stronger now." Thinking of Han and Shinto, Ayan remarked, "I hope so. How he was destroyed, I need to anyway." She reviewed her circumstances 2 days after her Jonin team departed for the capital. She made the decision to postpone sending Gaara and Shira on their mission. Not until Ayan returned. At first, they planned to use a few other shinobi to push out an Odo base. She would now send them without them. The toad had summoned itself and was still wet on her desk. There was an SOS in the scroll. One from a leaf Jiraiya. She never imagined how things had gotten worse. After assuming power, a man by the name of Danzo Shimura enslaved Naruto Uzumaki. They called him and Tsunade Senju traitors. Teams had already been sent by her to thwart any orders directed against Tsunade-sama. The rescue effort included members of her own team. "Naruto," she said as she examined the scroll, "I won't let that country hurt my clan again. When Ayan gets back I'm going to make sure you get out of there. Or I'll burn the entire country trying." A young man was leading Tamari. The land of fire was deep within them. They were reportedly on a rescue expedition to protect the Sanin Tsunade. Picken was the boy's name. He was one of Suna's hero's younger brothers. He was already fairly well known for his abilities in Scorch Release. Not too far away, there was the sound of fighting. Break off and be ready. We will need your puppets. Everyone else on me, Picken said, turning to face Kankuro. As they approached the village's edge, they noticed that two Sannin were encircled by a group of leaf Anbu. Orochimaru and his subordinate were on the run. Tsunade, on the other hand, was frozen in fear and shock. When Tamari noticed that some were going to hit her, she quickly opened her fan and swiped, sending a huge gust that threw all of the ninja off balance. The Sannin was surrounded by all 6 shinobi. She was still lost. Picken yelled, "Tsunade-sama." But she didn't respond. Defend her at all costs. The Anbu got involved right away. They were efficient and well organized. Tamari found it difficult to put them down. Ameno was, too. They gained an advantage when Kankuro's puppets attacked from behind the enemy position. "There are so many of them," said Tamari as he killed 2 more shinobi and Ameno spun around, slicing through another. Before anyone could respond, a young woman landed in front of Tsunade and said, "Tsunade-sama." She also shook the Sannin back to reality, asking, what is happening?" "Konoha sent ninja to kill you." Turning around, "These sand shinobi are defending you right now. Hyatsu-sama has offered you refuge until we figure out what's going on," Picken said, dispatching 3 more masked ninjas with a massive ball of his scorch release. "You are under no obligation to stay, but Jiraiya-sama asked us to." She stared at the dead, confused, and said, "Damn it." Ameno was attempting to heal one of the sand ninja while Tamari covered her, saying, "All right, let's go. After we leave her, I'll assist in healing your ninja." As they entered the capital of the Land of Stone, Ain remained composed. He carried Futsumaki on his shoulder, which was scanning the area to improve his own vision. With Gento's assistance, a sensor was also present, and it was turning out to be a good one. As he entered the palace, he noticed that he was being glared at by a number of Iwa Guardian shinobi. The daimyo turned to face the boy beside him and said, "Shinobi can wait in the main chamber. Funny business is not what we want." "Oh," smiled Korikyo, "and what about us?" Another voice said, "Let them send the little puppet user in with their samurai," and the man shot a glare back at their commander. The boy didn't flinch, though, because he had faced something far more terrifying than himself. "Are you sure you want me in there?" Han approached with a confident expression in his eyes as he looked down at Ain. "Yes. I am stronger than I was when you took my arm, Han." Ain glared up at the man, saying, "I can handle you again." "Oh, how much fun," the daimyo laughed. To witness such a strong rivalry. Both Han and Ain looked at the man with deadpan expressions before glaring at each other again. "Come this way, Sama." "Be careful, Ain-kun," Korikyo said, nodding as Ain glanced at him. "Prepare for any eventuality." Ain nodded, "Hi Korikyo-san." As he walked in, he glanced at the samurai who were with him. They didn't seem like much, but their armor was extremely elaborate, and as the conversation began, the Wind Daimyo's gaze on the stone daimyo was more solemn than Ain had noticed in the man since they had parted ways. "Zentaro daimyo." The daimyo laughed and said, "I want to talk about a truce with the Land of Stone." "And why would I accept a truce with such a weak country? Iwagakure is stronger and more respected than your Sunagakure. You believe that the small difference this one and his team made in the leaf matters." Ain looked around, unsure of what was wrong, but something felt strange. Sunagakure has demonstrated it has increased its power and influence. Konoha is no longer in favor. In the Land of Fire, tensions have been rising. Our borders will eventually expand while theirs will contract. What the heck? Then you would declare war. Perhaps I do, the stone daimyo smiled. When an explosion shook the palace, Ain's hand moved to his tanto, his chakra chains just inches from the skin, ready to battle the Jinchuriki. "Perhaps I should take the time to have one of my strongest shinobi kill you and this young boy." However, neither of them attacked. Instead, they turned around as Oto shinobi launched attacks down at the 2 royal members. Ain was faster, though, and Futsumaki jumped, stabbing one of the shinobi before his attack got off. Han allowed his steam to increase his power, while Ain drew his weapon and released his chains. "We need to go now." Han and Ain moved at the same time, with Ain cutting the ninja's neck with one of his chakra chains before he twisted and jumped, stabbing another ninja in the chest before landing next to the daimyo. The daimyo turned to see the young Jonin holding off a Jinchuriki by himself. The Jinchuriki, however, saw his chance and powered himself up, summoning Shinigami to send the puppet at him. Using his own chakra to increase his own speed, they started fighting in the middle of the meeting hall. "Please, Sama, we have to leave. The samurai drew their blades and began cutting down enemy ninja as they pushed their way to the other ninja. Yes please. Please get me out of here. Korikyo-sama. Maki sent her cloth out, grabbing the samurai and slamming him into the ground, killing him. Korikyo drew 2 hand fans and spun, sending sharp gusts of wind at the enemy ninja and guards, cutting them into pieces. We must reach the daimyo. When the whole palace trembled, he turned and nodded, asking, what's going on? The daimyo and 3 samurai rushed in at that moment, saying, Shinobi-san. The Jinchuriki Han is being held off by Ayan-kun. When the Iwa shinobi attempted to land on the daimyo, Genko fired 3 sand bullets at him, saying, all right, let's go. We'll reassemble with Ayan. Korikyo-san, are you certain? I have to be, the man said, slashing another man's neck. Fighting a Jinchuriki and defending the daimyo are incompatible. Ayan fought the Jinchuriki in a great battle, using all of his puppet arsenal, which was different from the last time he fought a battle like this, when he only used 4 that had controllable seals against Shinto. This time, he had all of his puppets covering each other's weaknesses. Suzaku was the only one not participating in the fight. Having a flying bird would not give him an advantage in the palace. Kinja crashed through a wall, sending Han hurtling through it. Ayan dropped Genbu on top of the Jinchuriki, sending him through multiple floors as Tenyo's fabric wrapped around him, smashing him into the ground so hard his armor started to crack and release steam before Han could react. While his puppets battled Han, Ayan was being brutal to the Jinchuriki. 3 ninja charged at him, and as he drew his wrist blade, a kunai flew towards him. Quick arm movements deflected each kunai, and he landed on one of the ninja, instantly killing him. Dropping Ayan narrowly avoided being struck by a stone hand that would have taken his head, and as he flipped his foot, it landed on his face just before Futsumaiki leapt onto his shoulder. Its mouth opened and it hurled poison darts at the 2 men, overwhelming the first one instantly and causing the other to roll out of the way. Ayan exclaimed, this is too easy. This is the capital, there should be stronger ninja. The Jinchuriki, covered in a layer of chakra that resembled steam and was boiling on the surface, followed closely behind Korikyo as he led his team and the daimyo out. They turned to see Ayan on top of Suzaku being flung out of the building. What the hell? There were screams in the streets below as Han fired giant black chakra balls at Ayan or his puppets, and the twins would set up barriers that blocked many of them while he and his other puppets dodged. The battle was destroying this entire part of the city, but despite its raw power, Ayan was holding his ground, and he remembered it from the battle. I need to get close. Tenyo and Shinigami materialized in front of him, and the 2 of them nose-dived at the Jinchuriki, blocking and deflecting the monster's tails with his puppets. Ayan launched himself towards the Jinchuriki at full speed, releasing his chakra chains just before colliding with him, pinned the Jinchuriki to the ground by stabbing into the chakra cloak, and stabbed Han in the chest with his tanto. Ayan hadn't realized how much damage he had caused to the man before he transformed, but his cloak started to pull away, revealing the man underneath, his mask severely damaged, the left eye gone. Why don't you kill me? My cousin is similar to you, Ayan said, drawing the blade and sheathing it. You are more than your village's weapon. Like I am. He flew away, restraining all of his puppets except Suzaku, leaving Han to reflect on his time with the village. He had forgotten the futility of his Jinchuriki status against an Uzumaki, and this was the second time he had lost because he was unable to break their chakra chains. Although he was strong and skilled, he had become so dependent on the powers that Kokuo had given him. The daimyo gave the boy a curious look as he landed next to his team. I apologize for sending you without a shinobi, daimyo-sama, he said, bowing to the man. Please, we must return and meet with your cage, he said, glancing at the group of ninja who had protected Suna. You saved my life and proved to me that Suna has become more an asset than ever before. After using too much chakra in that battle, Ayan felt his body wanting to shut down. I believe my Kinja is large enough for us all to travel on, he said. If you want, I can drive us back to the capital. Ayan used the last of his chakra to get them out of the land of stone before any force could cut them off, and when they reached a small village on their border, he was finally forced to make them walk. That would be wonderful. Everyone climbed on top of the giant snake. He practically fell off Kinja and said, sorry. Korikyo caught him, saying, don't worry, kid. You recently engaged in combat with a Jinchuriki and prevailed. I'm pretty sure none of us could do that. Ayan grinned at that remark. Maki and Genki, he said, turning to his men. You two are to return the daimyo to the capital and help the samurai. I'll go with Keisuke. The betrayal of Odo and Iwa will require our response. Returning to the daimyo, they both said, "Hi. When the boy is able, I want to talk to him. Inform him that I have a large following." After bowing to the man, Korikyo picked up the puppet user and left for the village, hoping the new Keisuke would be understanding after witnessing her son defeat a Jinchuriki on his own. "As you command, Sama." After Tamari and her team successfully retrieved the 2 legendary Sannin, Hyatsu glanced at the 2 reports in front of her. Jiraiya returned to Kanagaku, telling them that he needed to get Naruto out, which was good, because she had been worried after the SOS he sent her, and now she knew it was time to put together her son's team. Tsunade went to work tending to everyone who received injuries. 2 days had passed since the battle in the Land of Stone capital, and her son had shown remarkable strength by taking on and defeating their Jinchuriki in single combat, something she had no idea her son was capable of. However, since his defeat in Konoha, he had been pushing himself much harder in an effort to get better and get ready for his rematch. Ayan, Gaara, and Shira, the members of Team Baki, were now standing in front of her, each staring at her in preparation for their mission. "I have a tough mission for you 3. Ayan smiled and said, "We're ready, Mom." She could see that he was still exhausted from the fight with Han, but she was proud of him nonetheless. At last, she got up and gave Ayan his scroll, saying, "You are going into the Land of Fire to meet up with Naruto and Jiraiya to get them out." "What's happening? Why are they leaving? Do they not cherish their village and country?" When Ayan read the mission briefing, Shira asked in confusion. "They imprisoned Naruto." Even though Gaara appeared emotionless on the outside, he was furious inside. Shikaku listened intently as the discussion went on, while Shira became much more irritated. Why would they imprison their own? To be their weapon and nothing more. Gaara spoke, his voice wavering slightly at the thought being nothing more than a weapon for Suna again. Hyatsu stood up. "Go and get our kin. Make sure he is safe." All 3 bowed and disappeared in a moment's notice. Naruto fell to the ground once more, his body trembling with pain as the 3 Anbu thrashed him around once more. He had been doing this for what felt like weeks. They had sealed him in a way that prevented him from molding his chakra, and then they went all out on him. There was no rhyme or logic to it yet. All he knew was that they were attempting to break him, but he was not going to do so. No matter what Danzo Jaku wanted, Naruto would resist. Either Erosensei would realize he was in danger, or his cousin would discover it and kill all these guards. An explosion occurred after one of the Anbu stabbed him in the shoulder, and the door flew off, crashing into the first Anbu. Before the other 2 could react, they were both knocked out. "Kid. I'm not sure how you managed to put yourself in such strange situations. I believed I was unlucky." Erosensei. Naruto's chest began to fill with relief as tears began to trickle out, and all of the fresh scars he had received appeared to come to life in a flash. He was soon gathered into an embrace, and he said, "I'm sorry, Gaki. I should have arrived sooner." Naruto sobbed uncontrollably, causing his body to tremble. However, Jiraiya was relieved that his godson was still alive and in charge of the Kyuubi, and that their conditioning had failed to break him. He separated and took out a bag, saying, "Here. I have your ninja gear and clothes here. We're leaving after I remove the seal." Danzo sent a huge force of Root Anbu and Jonin out to retrieve his weapon because he wouldn't allow Hiruzen's stupid student to destroy their greatness. Naruto was dressed quickly and they were running out of the village when the alarms began to sound. Flipping, he saw 4 Anbu behind him, and as Naruto moved from tree to tree, kunai flew by and exploded not far in front of him. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. Hundreds of Naruto charged back at the ninja in a matter of seconds, refusing to be apprehended. He started to feel angry and kept running, occasionally sending out clones to battle shinobi. Jiraiya defeated them all in a matter of seconds, but he was unprepared for a huge fist to slam into him and Naruto, sending them both crashing into the ground below. The other 2 Shika Ino Cho members were present, along with Hiyashi Hyuga and Hana Inuzuka, who may not be a clan head but who never believed that a clan needed a head. Shikaku Nara looked down with the other clan heads. "Return the Kyuubi no Kitsune's Jinchuriki to us, Jiraiya." Naruto nearly snarled at them, saying, "You should have brought more shinobi, Shikaku. The Hokage won't ask again. You were instructed to imprison his legacy, but I won't allow it. Jiraiya, please." Although Jiraiya crossed his arms, he said, "No, it would be better for the boy if he just complied." It wouldn't. Nobody could stop the 9 Tails from going on the rampage and destroying Konoha if you lost him to the beast. Not after Danzo called Tsunade and me traitors. Then our combined might will destroy you. Jiraiya smiled. Naruto. Hiashi used his Byakugan. Keep running, he said, looking up and drawing a kunai prepared for battle. Though Naruto shook his head, no. I'll catch up for a little while. I'm willing to fight you. I'm not going to be a kid for long. In addition, reinforcements ought to arrive to assist us if I'm correct. Naruto reluctantly started to run, but Shadow nearly stopped him when Jiraiya threw a huge ball of fire that sent the clan heads flying. Glancing over his shoulder, he witnessed Jiraiya twist Hiashi's arm while his hair reached out to grab Hana's Ninken, then toss both and engage the Ino Shikacho formation. Naruto had never been more appreciative of Jiraiya's incredible fighting skills than he was at that moment. Though the sounds of their battle faded into the distance, Naruto continued to run until he found himself in the center of a huge field. He was now growing weary from all the running after all the torture, and his body was running on fumes. Drawing a kunai, Naruto turned to see Danzo and Anbu standing there. Don't worry, he said, I'm shocked you thought you could get away. You will soon resemble the rest of my route. Simply give up. The sound of chirping birds interrupted Naruto as he was about to make a hand sign, and Kakashi quickly struck the back of one of the Anbu with his lightning blade, saying, yeah, I don't think so, Danzo. Kakashi smiled at him and shrugged, saying, you dare stand against a Hokage Sharingan, Kakashi. Yeah, well, my loyalty to my sensei and the late third is stronger than it is for you. Go get the boy. Although Kakashi only grinned as 10 puppets crashed into the clearing, Naruto was startled when sand encircled him, shielding him from the detonating explosive tags. I'll kill Kakashi. Ayan felt a great sense of relief as he looked down at the battlefield. He was on top of Suzaku, and his newest puppet, Seiyu, was shooting streams of water at the Anbu, pushing them away. Shira entered the fray, swiftly dispatching shinobi with his strong punches and kicks, shattering their bodies, and Gaara, using his sand-like waves, killed Anbu that had gotten too close to his cousin. As the battle between Danzo and Kakashi grew more intense, Ayan leapt down and used the blade in his wrist to instantly kill 2 Anbu. He then rolled up to his feet and stopped in front of Naruto, who had tears in his eyes and a distressed expression on his face. Don't worry, cousin, he said. Our goal is to get you out of here. After landing, Suzaku grabbed Naruto and threw him onto the bird. Grinning, he turned to face the battlefield while his puppets covered his team and said, time to go. Massive jutsu was going off as they left the battle, and Gaara and Shira leapt up on Kinja as they started to retreat. Naruto felt a great deal of guilt after witnessing his sensei being destroyed by a powerful wind jutsu. He was to blame for both of his sensei defending him, Naruto. Looking up at Ayan, he saw the boy smile. They'll be okay, I promise. Standing atop one of his war toads, Jiraiya observed all 5 of the shinobi on the ground, with Hana's Ninken complaining as he attempted to rouse her. They were all alive, but they wouldn't be going on any missions for a while. Hiashi was the one in the worst shape, and he sighed as he approached the Ninken, who started growling, yeah. He hadn't wanted to go this far, but he had no other option. Here, when she wakes, give her this. It is from Tsunade and should get them up enough to get home. Standing up, he cracked his neck, time to get out of fire. Later, Danzo sat in his desk. His arm was wrapped again. 3 eyes. It took 3 eyes to beat Kakashi. That man was powerful and his tricks good. Danzo was better though, at least the way he was right now was. He needed to make plans now. The clan heads of the 5 royal clans were defeated soundly by Jiraiya. Naruto was taken to Suna Uzumaki Kyatsu. As he started to gather his forces, a mad smile spread across his face. If you wanted war, you should have just asked. He would burn out the sand and demonstrate his supremacy over all nations.